The gates of Disneyland had already closed for the night. The park was hushed, lit by the soft glow of street lamps and occasional flickers of neon from closed attractions. I was part of a small overnight crew, just me and two others, hired to do cleaning and maintenance while the park rested. It was my first overnight shift. I'd heard stories, nothing official, just rumors whispered among cast members, about strange shadows at closing time or odd noises on Main Street where the wind apparently didn't belong. I dismissed them as overactive imaginations, until that night. Around midnight, I was sweeping along a narrow walkway near the Storybook Castle. The castle looked ethereal under moonlight, as if painted from an old fairy tale. But the castle seemed too quiet, almost brooding. I noticed a single window open on the second floor, a window that was always sealed after dark. My coworker, Jessie, had mentioned earlier that every window had to be locked by 11:45. She shrugged it off as just a drill. I hesitated, broom in hand. Why was it open? I assumed a maintenance crew forgot. I walked closer, intending to shut it before we did rounds. As I approached, I heard faint laughter. Childish, high-pitched, echoing softly from inside the castle. It sounded like kids at recess. I stopped. My heart thudded. There should be no kids inside at this hour. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a speaker glitch, maybe someone still cleaning inside. The castle was closed to the public, but not necessarily off limits to maintenance, right? Or so I told myself. I pushed open the heavy wooden door at the side. The corridor beyond was dark, lit only by emergency lights glowing a weak red. The air felt cold, unnaturally cold, though the outside air of the park was mild. As I stepped in, the laughter stopped. Silence. The corridor stretched ahead, walls lined with ornate paintings from Disney classics, princes, heroes, villains, but in the dim red light, they all looked distorted. Their painted eyes seemed to flicker. I told myself it was just the light. I should go. I called out softly, "Hello? Maintenance. Anybody here?" No answer, only the echo of my own voice. I stepped forward, broom still in hand. On the floor ahead was a small puddle, not water. It looked darker, thick, like spilled paint. I dropped the broom and stepped back. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoed behind me. I whipped around, nothing but red gloom. The footsteps stopped. The childish laughter returned. Volume low, almost a whisper coming from somewhere ahead, then to my left, then inside my own head. Cold whisper. No, don't leave. The light flickered, and I saw movement ahead. A shadow darted across the corridor, so fast I hardly caught it. But I caught the eyes, pale, glowing, not reflective of light, but luminous on their own. I froze. I wanted to run, but my legs felt heavy. Then the laughter, suddenly high and hysterical, filled the space. I grabbed my broom and turned to run. At the same moment, a figure appeared in front of me. Small, child-sized, hunched over. It wore a tattered dress, the sort of dress a little girl might wear in the 1950s. The figure tilted its head unnaturally, at an impossible angle. Its face was blank. No features, just smooth, pale skin. Its arms jerked to the side. I felt my body go cold. I stumbled backward, broom clattering to the floor. The child figure took a step forward. I backed into the wall. My breathing came fast. I somehow choked out, I'll leave. A voice, raspy, childlike but hollow, whispered right next to my ear, "Stay. Play." I screamed. The next instant, the lights surged, ordinary yellowish overhead lights, and everything snapped back to normal. The corridor was empty. The puddle was gone. The door behind me was closed. I was shaking, heart pounding, and my broom lay still on the floor. I didn't wait. I turned and bolted. Half blind, I raced down corridors I didn't know, corridors that now looked familiar but terrifying. I could hear more footsteps, laughter, whispering voices trailing behind me. I didn't dare look back. I ran until I emerged through a staff exit, right onto a back alley by Fantasyland. The gates were locked, the park silent. I leaned against the cold metal barrier and gasped, waiting. I saw motion at the corner near the castle courtyard, a quick shadow. When I dared to look, there was nothing but the faint outline of that castle behind trees. Jesse and the other crew member, Marco, were waiting by the janitor's room. They looked at me. I remember Jesse's expression, confusion, concern, fear. I didn't speak. I could barely. "What happened?" she asked. I saw something," I said in a rasp. "Inside the castle," she frowned. "Inside? Nobody comes in there now at night, not even us." Then she looked to Marco, uneasy. Suddenly the walkie-talkie crackled. "You guys out?" Shift end in 10. I nodded slowly. I didn't know what to say. Neither did they. We loaded the cleaning supplies into the van and left the park. That night, I barely slept. I tried to tell myself it was just exhaustion, a prank, some stress, but the memory haunted me. The next morning, I came back to turn in my uniform, resign. On my way out from the staff break area, I passed a corridor that led toward the castle. I stopped. On the wall next to me, painted plaster, there was a fresh small handprint, smeared slightly as if someone had pressed a damp hand there and walked away. Pale, whitish, exactly like the color of the figure I saw. I reached for a rag but recoiled. The handprint had no ridges, like skin without pores or texture. Smooth, too smooth. I backed away quickly and left. I never returned to Disneyland. Later, I looked up records, past cast member logs, staff turnover, maintenance issues, nothing unusual. No reports of ghosts or hauntings. Maybe the place simply didn't want to acknowledge them. Weeks later, on the news, I saw something. A minor story about a young girl who went missing decades ago, in the 1950s, during a Mardi Gras-style celebration near LA. She was never found. Officially, she'd simply wandered off and was presumed lost. Her name appeared in no recent records. Her parents moved away. The case went cold. The article included a single photograph, grainy black and white, a little girl in a dress standing beside what looked like a merry-go-round. I stared at the photo. The face was blurred, maybe out of focus or intentionally obscured. But I froze. The dress looked identical to the one worn by the figure I saw that night. The folds, the style, the collar, even the torn hem. The eyes, the deepest darkness there, glowed in the flash of the camera, and the mouth seemed twisted in a silent plea. After that, I called a friend, someone who kept contact with former staff. The rumors I'd dismissed earlier, laughter after dark, footsteps on empty rides, strange sightings near the castle, they weren't just rumors. People claimed sightings almost every few years. But each time, after one person reported something, their record disappeared. The people quit. Cast management denied anything. Some people vanished from public records altogether. Others changed names. One name, however, kept resurfacing, never tied to a face, just initials, LA 1957. Some said it meant Lost and Abandoned 1957. Others said it referred to the missing girl from that old news article. Every time someone claimed a sighting, they saw a ghostly child by night, dress worn, eyes glowing, always near the castle, always alone. I started to dream of her. The nights after I quit, I'd fall asleep and see those luminous eyes, wide and pleading, the same hallway, the same small handprint on the wall, whispered giggles, soft footsteps. The voice, play, longing, sad, aching. Each time I thought, maybe I'm going crazy, until I woke and found my sheets damp like someone had pressed against them. I couldn't explain it. I stopped talking about it. Some people need their illusions, magical castles, friendly characters. The picture of Disneyland I held was bright, cheerful, safe. I didn't want to ruin that for anyone. But some truths are too heavy to ignore. 6 months later, I was walking past a newsstand in downtown LA. I stopped at a tabloid, a senseless, silly headline about a haunted castle at Disneyland. I scoffed, but I leafed through. There was an article, grainy photos, subtitles like "Some former cast members claim park is haunted." 2 names mentioned, Julie M. and R.W., former night shift cast. Their story: they entered the castle after hours to repair a broken lantern, heard laughter, saw a little girl at the balcony window. One quote, "Her eyes shone white like embers, and when I dropped my flashlight, I swear I felt her breath on my neck." It hit me cold. I half expected the paper to burst into flame. How could 2 people tell the same story? Different nights, different years, same castle window, same laughter, same ghostly child? I realized that maybe the park doesn't want to know. Maybe some things get buried under the hustle of rides and crowds. Later that week, I sat with a friend who still works in maintenance, albeit at another amusement park. I told him I saw the girl, the handprint, everything. He didn't look surprised. He said almost casually, "LA 57. She never left. She's part of the shadows now." When I asked what he meant, he said, "You don't go back once you see. She owns the corridors after midnight." I moved away from California soon after. New city, new job. I tried to live normally, but memories returned. The laughter echoing at midnight, the small handprint on the wall, the pale dress, the glowing eyes. I sometimes woke sweaty, heart racing, as if someone had knelt beside me and whispered. Then one evening, Almost a year since I first walked out of the park, I found an envelope slipped under my apartment door. No note. Inside, a small sepia-toned photo about 4 inches by 6. A vintage photo of a little girl standing by a castle. The castle's spires looked familiar, though faded. The little girl wore the same dress, the same silent, pleading eyes staring straight at the camera. On the back, someone had scrawled in small, neat handwriting, "Come play tonight." I slammed the envelope closed, stomach dropping. I didn't open it again. I didn't tell anyone. Months passed. I tried to forget it, pretend it was a joke, a prank, coincidence. I tried to move on, but I never discarded the photo. It sits in my desk drawer now, behind bills and junk mail. Sometimes I open the drawer at night and look at it. The eyes stare back, unblinking. I tell myself I'm imagining it, that the light in my room plays tricks. Still, sometimes I catch a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of pale fabric, a tiny handprint on the wall, the distant echo of a child's laughter. I know I'm scarred. You don't unsee what I saw. The world of magic and laughter at Disneyland hides other things, things not meant for daylight. I know now. Silhouettes drift where costumes once gleamed. Footsteps echo where no one walked, and sometimes in the hush of the night, the shadows move on their own. If you go to Disneyland, stroll by the castle after dark, pretend the rides and crowds are gone, turn and look at the windows on the second floor. If a window is cracked open, just a sliver, do not peer inside. Do not step closer, because if you do, you might catch sight of a little girl in a tattered dress. Pale, silent, her eyes glowing, watching, waiting, whispering softly, play. Some stories belong to fairy tales, others to nightmares. Disneyland has both. Story the end. The sun dipped below the horizon as my bus rumbled down Ball Road, the soft glow of neon signs guiding the way to the parking structure where the crowd had already begun to thin. I'd volunteered for a late shift at Disneyland Park, drawn in not just by the paycheck, but by the enchantment that still tugged at me from childhood. The promise of magic, even after dark. The crowd had dwindled, the cheerful laughter and excited chatter of families replaced by echoes of footsteps and distant hums of rides winding down. I walked through the gates under the yellow-orange lampposts of Main Street, USA, the air crisp, carrying the scent of popcorn mixing faintly with night air. The place looked almost empty, but the emptiness felt heavy. My first assignment was near Haunted Mansion. Officially, I was closing assistant, checking lights, guiding any last-minute parkgoers to the exits, wiping down benches, ensuring props were secure. But inside, something felt off from the start. The greeting lights on Main Street flickered strangely. A soft hum, then blackout, a warning sound, and then all lights restored. The kind you might chalk up to a glitch or an old park wiring. I took it in stride, thinking nothing more of it. Yet inside, I felt I wasn't alone. I entered the mansion through service doors. The staff corridors smelled of latex paint and stale carpeting. The regular, cheerful cast member chatter was replaced by quiet. I flicked on my handheld walkie-talkie. Static crackled. "This is Sam, over," I whispered. Silence. I tapped again. Still nothing. I reminded myself they were downstairs cleaning up on coffee break. I checked the first floor. Lights on, dim ambient music still playing, just enough to linger in the damp air. No people. Strange passers-by had long deserted, but the place felt too alive. I began sweeping floors and wiping down surfaces. That's when I heard it, a soft voice, low, like a sigh, coming from somewhere deep inside the building. "Welcome home." It might have been part of the mansion's soundtrack, I reasoned at first. The ride's ambient audio often looped weird phrases just half heard. But the tone, it wasn't cheerful or old-timey. It was slow, dragging, and it didn't belong to the ride. My stomach twisted. I froze mid-wipe. Listening. Silence. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing down the corridor behind me, where the rotating corridor prop had long stopped moving. I didn't dare look. I hurried forward, heart pounding. I convinced myself it was a stray custodian. Disneyland still had late shift workers. Maybe someone forgot something. But the corridor lights ahead flickered again, this time in a tight rhythm, staccato, like someone was pacing under those lights. I pressed my palm to the wall, sliding along until I reached the lobby area, where the large stained glass windows with ghostly silhouettes glowed faintly in the dark. The chandeliers were off. I switched on my flashlight. The beams cut through dust motes in the air, and I scanned slowly. Nothing. No one. No flashlight or shadow to betray a person. Only the still mannequins, the dummy suits, the musty furniture, the dusty corridors leading into deeper darkness. A cough, somewhere beyond the second floor. Clear, forced, heavy. My breath caught. I hesitated, then whispered into the walkie-talkie again. Anyone there? Nothing. The static crackled faintly, almost too faint. Then a whisper, so faint I first thought it was in my head. Help me, it said. High-pitched, sorrowful. I froze. My flashlight beam dropped to the floor. I took a shaky breath. Maybe someone was stuck, a cleaner or worker late. Maybe they needed help. My small training kicked in. Don't go alone. Wait for backup. I stepped onto the stairs leading to the second floor service corridor. The floorboards creaked under my boots. Halfway up there was a distant creak, like a door opening slowly, but heavy against old hinges. My flashlight flickered, the faint shape of a figure at the end of the hall, pale, motionless, slight. My chest twisted. Hello? My voice cracked. The figure drifted backward. I saw no features, just darkness where a face should be, shadow pooling where clothes hung. But I saw its hand reach out. A flicker of broken skin, too distorted, too wrong. I slammed my flashlight up into its face. Nothing but black. The figure turned and walked away, footfalls dragging along the carpet. I blinked and the figure vanished, like it had never existed. My flashlight dropped for a moment. When I raised it again, the hallway looked empty. Normal, not haunted, just empty service corridor. I ran. Down the stairs, back through the foyer. My breath came in short, harsh gasps. I pressed the walkie-talkie again, tapping and shouting, Security! Maintenance! Anyone! Please! I need someone! Only static. I reached the exit door, that wide metal gate separating the mansion from the outside corridor towards Main Street. I pushed. The handle wouldn't budge. My gloves slipped in sweat. I tugged again, harder. The door creaked, stuck. A mechanical grind from somewhere behind me. The lights flickered off in the foyer. Total dark. I exhaled, waited. The flickering returned, slower now. Only the mansion lighting. Soft grays, dim yellows, not the cheerful hues of Main Street. The ride silent. Everything abandoned. Except for that feeling of being watched, of something lingering just at the edges of perception. Then came the whispering. Low, multiple voices, overlapping, indecipherable murmurs like a small crowd of ghosts arguing softly. I put a trembling finger to my ears. It hurt, high-pitched, abrasive, but I couldn't block it out. My flashlight dropped again, turning off. I turned in circles, trying to find the exit. Only darkness. My breath froze when something cold brushed against my neck. I jerked forward, the door handle behind me now, inches from my hand. I froze. My skin felt numb. Then a whisper right behind me, Don't leave us. Pure panic pushed me. I grabbed the handle and pulled. The gate gave way with a loud snapping sound. I stumbled out of the mansion's service entrance and onto the narrow corridor between buildings. Outside, the distant silhouette of the park's lights blinked. Through the service door glass, I saw the mansion's lobby, empty, dark, as if frozen in time. I ran. Barefoot against concrete, gloved hands shaking, I sprinted toward the security hut near the ride entrance. I pounded on the door. Open up, please, I screamed. The guard looked up, startled. Whoa. Hey, kid, chill. He stepped out. I gasped. I heard voices. Someone. There was a person. A figure. Upstairs, he frowned. Nobody's been up there in 2 hours. He reached to radio for maintenance. Then his eyes went wide. Hey, weren't you assigned to close the chimney walk-through? I realized he was referencing the boarded-up corridor near the mansion entrances. A small walkway they closed off after hours. I shook my head. No, I'm here for the mansion. The guard's face sagged. He lowered his voice. Look, you might want to call it a night, kid. Go home. He tried to guide me toward the gate. I looked back, toward the mansion. The windows felt like black holes, the faint shape of a doorway in the shadows, as if the door I'd slammed through did not lead outside, but into deeper darkness. My throat closed. I couldn't speak. I shook my head. No, I whispered. I'm staying. He looked at me like I was insane. Suit yourself. On your own. I spent the rest of the night between the haunted mansion's guard hut and the interior security office. My walkie-talkie silent, the phone lines dead, the radio logs all blank. I counted every shadow, every creak of floorboards, every flicker of light, convinced the thing would come back. I don't remember sleeping. The sun rose slowly over the castle turrets, pink and gray. Maintenance crew trickled in. One walked past my post inside the mansion loading area, and gave me a nod, friendly like nothing happened. I didn't respond. I just stared at him until he passed, machinery rattling, day crew arriving. No one asked questions about what I saw, or maybe they asked, but no one recorded it. I walked through the park that morning, guests streaming in, children pointing at balloons, families queuing for rides, everything normal, bright, innocent, magical. I couldn't interact. I drifted through the lines, past the castle, through Fantasyland, feeling like a ghost myself. In that daylight, the park felt safe, beautiful, the kind of place I used to believe in when I was young. But I knew I had seen something. I carried it with me in the hum behind my eyes, the memory of those whispers. As I clocked out, my name scratched into the roster, I took one last look back at the haunted mansion. The midday sun washed along the roofline, the chimneys glinted, bright and cheerful on top of the spires. From the outside, I would have sworn nothing was off. If I'd never gone in again, maybe no one would believe me. Maybe it was stress, imagination, lunch skip, adrenaline returning to calm, but I knew better. Over the next few weeks, I kept checking the nightly news, waiting for something, anything. A report about staff quitting, someone collapsing, a strange shift change. Nothing. The mansion reopened as usual. Tourists still queued for the spooky train. Cast members waved, children giggled. When I walked in each morning, I half expected to look into the mirror and see shadows behind my own eyes. Instead, I looked better natural. Watching the world again felt heavy. Colors too bright, smiles too wide, laughter too loud. Disneyland had swallowed a piece of me in darkness. I couldn't find it again. One night, I returned on my own. Curiosity or guilt or something deeper tugged me back toward the mansion. I stood across the lawn in the dim lamplight. The gates closed, no crowd. A gentle breeze pushed through the empty courtyard. Doors locked. I slipped through a side service gate, heartbeat loud in my ears, back stooped against cobblestones. I would clean. I would prove nothing was wrong. Inside, the lobby lights were off, the ghostly facade black. I clicked on my flashlight. Nothing. The smell was sharper, damp feathers, rotting fabric, stale perfume. I remembered mannequins, dummies, the suits from old costumes stored under the ride, the stench of stale plastic. I stepped carefully, every footstep echoing. Then a soft sound, giggling, light laughter, faint steps, the kind a child might make, padding on carpeted stairs. But I was alone. I flipped the flashlight toward the sound. Silhouettes. Just beyond the beams, at the edge of visibility, I saw 3 figures, small, barefooted, grayed, eyes glinting in hollow lids. Their faces were expressionless like blank porcelain masks, but their heads tilted in unison toward me. A trio of children. My breath hitched. I forced my voice. Hello? The oldest, center, parted lips, darkness there, laughter, soft, low waves of it, and I realized they had no mouths, only hollow darkness where their mouths should be. As the laughter rose, the figures began to drift forward, sliding ghost-like, their hands reaching for me. I turned, ran. The corridor twisted. Darkness swallowed the path. I tripped. A wall, cold brick, finite, solid. Then the world shifted. Light, bright, white, institutional. I recognized tile floors and fluorescent hum, the backstage tunnel behind the park, maintenance corridors not even cast members saw. I caught my breath, sweating, knuckles bruised from hitting the floor, my vision swimming. I staggered forward. The kids stood behind a door, staring. But their heads slowly tilted, and the shape of their bodies slid back and flattened, like shadows pulled against a wall, dissolving. Then they were gone. Silence. I fled, out of the tunnel, into a staff walkway leading to backstage parking, into the parking lot's fluorescent glare. No one at the guard booth looked twice at me. I half expected them to escort me out. I left my badge on the fence, walked to my car, phone clutched in hand. I didn't open it until I reached my apartment. No messages. Nothing. I didn't turn on the radio. I held the phone in my hand for hours, waiting for a call, for a text, maybe from maintenance, maybe from the guard hut, maybe from someone else. No signal. I fell asleep on the floor, the phone still cold under my palm. In the mornings after, I avoided the park, took different jobs, nothing regular, nothing stable. The nightmares faded, not gone, but quieter. The whispers replaced by heavy breathing, static in the distance. Sometimes I thought I heard faint giggling, the soft patter of child feet outside my door. I'd swing the door open, flash a light into the hallway, empty. Empty walls, harsh artificial hall lights, silence. But the fear stayed. roots taking hold under my ribs, spreading night by night. I thought maybe I'd scare it off by burning old clothes, moving across town, put distance between me and that place, but it followed. I dreamt of dark corridors, walls shifting, doors folding backward until there was only blackness and breathing. I woke covered in sweat, my heart racing before dawn. I started sleeping with the lights on. I began avoiding mirrors, refusing calls. I forgot what day of the week it was. The memory of Disneyland felt like a fever hallucination. Occasionally, I heard whispers of rumors. People claiming weird things at night shifts at the park, odd disappearances, cast members leaving mid-shift after hearing strange noises. I looked into them. No records. Officially, no show. The people never stayed long enough to wrinkle their names into staff lists or HR memos or coffee breaks. No reports filed, no notes in any logbooks. One interview had a woman claiming she walked out in tears after hearing children crying through the halls, but the interview caught fire, the article deleted quickly. A rumor. A myth. But it sounded familiar. Years later, I still jump when a door creaks. I still pause when lights flicker. I still hear faint breath behind me when I walk down a dark hallway. I carry a small flashlight in my bag, still drawn to corners of darkness. I carry memories I don't share. Friends I used to have lost interest when I stopped answering my phone. Family distant, tired of my distant stare. I exist, but when someone asks what haunted me, I can only whisper, "Some things follow you in darkness." Because I know. Once you've looked into the black behind the mirror, once you've heard the laughter with no mouth, once the walls breathe, there's no going back. Sometimes in the middle of the night, I dream I'm back on Main Street. The park clean, cheerful, bright. I stroll past the castle gates, past candy apple stalls and red balloons. Voices, excited, happy, children laughing. But just beyond, from the corner of my vision, the spires of the Haunted Mansion cast a long, dark shadow across the pavement. The crowds part, the laughter fades, the night air stills, and I know I'm not supposed to look over, yet I always do. Always just for a second. I wake up cold, trembling, the flashlight beside me, battery low, and I wonder if someday I'll have the courage or the madness to walk back through the gates. Or maybe someone else will. Someone curious. Maybe even you. Step through the service door, walk the halls after midnight. Listen carefully. You might hear the soft sigh of a welcome, the panic behind the walls, the laughter of children seeking to drag you into blackness. And then you'll know some dreams aren't meant to be rides. Some doors aren't meant to be reopened. Some shadows don't fade with the morning light. Story the end. The day started ordinary enough. I had convinced my roommate Jenna to drive us down to Disneyland Park for a spontaneous weekend escape. We got there mid-afternoon. The sky was the softest shade of golden blue, late summer warmth still clinging to the breeze. The park buzzed with kids laughing, parents calling, high-heeled strollers rolling along the sidewalks. I clutched my camera, hoping to catch candid shots of the magic. Jenna held a map, charting out tomorrow's plan. A ride on It's a Small World, the Haunted Mansion, maybe snacks around Main Street, USA. But as evening fell, something shifted. A kind of hush drifted over the park. The crowds thinned. Soft warnings flickered on old animatronic faces. Lights that should have stayed on, park lanterns, lampposts, neon signs, began to dim, humming with a tired, unnatural buzz. By the time we reached Fantasyland, the cheerful music that usually chirped behind the scenes had stopped entirely. The quiet pressed in. We exchanged uneasy glances. "We'll ride the haunted house, then head out," I whispered, though my voice sounded too loud amid the gloom. We walked, eyes shifting constantly, like we were waiting for something to happen. Jenna led the way to the exterior door of Haunted Mansion. The ride's iconic looming manor stood eerily still. No staff, no lights by the main entrance, nothing. The usual crowd waiting for the ride had vanished. We backed up, exchanged nervous smirks. A normal ride would have a line 2 or 3 deep. Tonight, emptiness. "This is weird," Jenna muttered. I nodded. Then something made both of us stop. Behind us, or somewhere nearby, a low groan echoed. It was soft but unmistakable, the sound of something shifting as if ancient wood moaned under weight. I lifted the map, rustling paper in the hush. I checked my watch. 8:54 p.m. The moon was thin, some lamps still flickered weakly. Despite the unease, curiosity rooted me in place. "Maybe it's part of the show," I said, though I wanted to laugh it off. "You know, like the house talking or something." I tried to sound casual. My heart thudded. Jenna pressed a hand against my arm. "Let's go," she said, not a question. Her voice shook. We turned. The walkway we had taken, lit faintly by overhead lamps, had changed. It looked longer. The geometry was off. Shadows cast by trees that weren't there flickered against the path. I realized I couldn't see where the main road to Main Street began. The familiar corners seemed to have dissolved. Before I could say anything, we heard footsteps behind us. Slow, deliberate, plodding, like someone trudging through snow. Heavy, unhurried. We paused, frozen. Then came whispering. Thin, distant, overlapping voices. Low at first. Maybe children, maybe the wind through old shutters, but unmistakable. Overlapping words that made no sense. Here, come, we wait, soon. They layered on each other until I couldn't tell one from another. I turned to Jenna, her eyes wide, face ashen. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. I didn't wait. I grabbed her hand and started walking. Fast, awkward, steps echoing oddly on the stones. The path seemed endless. We reached a fork. 2 paths dividing. One led left towards dim lampposts, which flickered faintly. The other led right toward darkness so dense it swallowed the edges of my vision. I hesitated. Jenna looked at me. I looked at her, and we made the same decision at once. We went right. The darkness closed around us like a vault door slamming shut. My eyes strained. I felt cold against my skin, like the air had drained its warmth with the flicker of a broken lamp. The whispering kept, more insistent now, begging, demanding. Some voices high and childish, others throttled and rough. I pulled up my phone to light the way, only to find the battery indicator blinking red, 5%. Less than a minute later, it died. The screen went black. Panic rose in my throat. I swallowed, jerking my eyes around. "Maybe there's a light switch?" I muttered, voice trembly. Jenna didn't answer. She just shook her head and gripped my hand. We pressed forward, footsteps behind us, heavier now, dragging. Then silence. Then a soft thud, like something dropping to the floor. We turned. Nothing. Just that oppressive black. Suddenly a blinking, dull glow crawled across the ground ahead, pale, sickly, greenish. Our path was illuminated unevenly, like weak stomach lights in a haunted house ride. I forced a step forward. My foot touched something soft, not pavement, something damp. The glow revealed sticky footprints, gravel mixed with something wet and dark. I shined the camera flashlight. I thought I'd packed extra batteries. Nothing. It had drained too. Jenna gasped. Under the dim light, I saw shapes, slender, pale, standing just above the ground. 1, then 2, leaning, tilting, faces elongated. Their mouths opened slowly, too slowly. Silent screams stretched on the green glow like wet gauze. Their eyes sank deep into black hollows. I yanked Jenna backward. Don't look, I hissed. But I saw, I couldn't unsee. Figures moving, limbs bending at odd angles, unnatural. One approached, reaching out with a hand that hovered inches from my shoulder. I lurched away, stumbling over something. A soft crunch, broken plaster or bone. I didn't want to look. Jenna screamed, sharp, high, a sound that cracked the hush like glass breaking. A moment later, another scream, soft, wet, as if from some animal. Then more, layered. Dozens of them, echoing off walls I couldn't see, surrounding us. We ran. I dragged her back, stumbling, dragging glove-wrapped fingers against ground, mixing grime and something darker. Our breaths came in ragged bursts. The whispers turned into chanting, "Come back! Stay forever! Join us!" I thought I was hearing the voices of children, innocent once, but twisted now. The tone shifted, mocking, hungry. Ahead a door, slightly ajar. Light seeped through the gap, pale yellow. Hope. I shoved Jenna. She moved. We lunged toward it. Behind us I heard footsteps, slow, shuffling like 3 or 4 pairs. They stopped at the door. A hiss, a rustling whisper that sounded like nails dragging against old wood. We pushed. The door resisted, creaking. Light grew stronger. I glimpsed a lobby, faded murals of cartoon characters, but the place looked abandoned. Dust flakes floated in shafts of light. The lobby doors, an emergency exit door, they were open. Outside I saw the outline of park fences. I stepped through and didn't stop. Jenna beside me gasped for air. I looked back only once. The lobby doorway was sealed by darkness, no figures, no light, as though swallowed whole. I ran. We sprinted along the edge of the park grounds, ripping through unmaintained gardens over fences, across gravel. Finally, we stumbled into a service road. A maintenance van sat idling, doors open, empty. But the key hovered in the ignition. Warm. Jenna climbed in. I followed, trembling. We screamed when the engine roared alive, for a moment. Then silence. Dead silence. The engine light blinked, but not in red or orange. Green. Pulsing. Soft. I shook. "Let's go," I said. No sound except the small glow of that blinking light. The van lurched forward. I stared out the dusty windshield. The fences, the trees, the lampposts, they blurred past. I saw figures at the gates, standing still, watching. Pale children with hollow eyes, their mouths slightly parted, no movement, just watching. I looked at Jenna. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Then the van jolted, like hitting a speed bump, but the road was smooth. I pressed my foot on the gas. The van sped, tires screeching. The figures by the gate stayed, unmoving, head tilting as though tracking us. Lights of traffic ahead. Relief somewhere outside the walls. Other people. Safety. I pushed the van faster. The hum of the engine became louder. Then suddenly the van stopped. No braking, no skid marks, just halted. I opened my mouth to scream, but nothing came. The breeze outside grew calm, too calm. The van door unlocked. Faded light seeped in through dusty windows. Then cold. Deep, by the feet of the van. Shadows stretched up. Figures entered, slowly. At first just shapes. Then tiny hands grabbed the dashboard, the steering wheel, one perched on the edge, turning a hollow head toward us. We slammed into the seats. I closed my eyes. The van rocked. Soft giggling, first distant, then closer, rising like a chorus echoing inside the metal shell. I pressed my back against the seat. I saw movement in my peripheral vision. A small hand sliding across the seat from the back row. Cold, damp, ashy. I couldn't tell how many hands. Dozens, maybe. They slithered across the leather toward me, toward Jenna. Something tapped on the window. Slow, deliberate, a fingertip rhythm like rain. I lifted my head, a face pressed against the glass. Pale, eyes sunken black, expression neutral. I forced the window down, my fingers shaking. That face leaned in, pressed its lips to the glass, and whispered. Aloud, softly, in a child's voice. "You forgot us." I screamed. The windows slammed shut. The van jolted violently, tires screeching. A cloud of dust exploded as we broke through something. A fence, maybe? The van lurched forward. I covered my ears. Jenna wrapped her arms around herself, rocking. The shaking lessened. The engine quieted. We sped away, hard and fast, until we broke onto a main road. Traffic. Streetlights. The hum of nightly city life. I don't remember pulling over. Don't remember where we went. I remember darkness, then light. Steady, bright light, sounds, distant car horns, a dog barking, sirens. Then we were outside a hospital, emergency room lights harsh against the night. We stumbled out. I collapsed. Jenna was shaking. We didn't say anything. We just cried. Quiet, muffled. Under the flickering fluorescent glow, I looked at my hands, scratches, red raw finger marks on my forearms, small bruises. Jenna's cheeks were wet but unscarred. Over the next few weeks, everything felt wrong. The air inside my apartment felt stale. The windows felt too thin. At night, I heard footsteps, soft, small, pacing outside. Sometimes in the hall, sometimes on the roof. Never a pattern. The whispers came when I turned off the lights. Low, rasping, overlapping, like voices from every corner of a closed room. I tried to sleep. I could barely close my eyes before I started seeing them. Pale children in ragged clothes, eyes black hollowed holes, crawling toward me from corners, from behind the bed, from under the floorboards. I'd jerk awake, gasping, sweat cold on my skin. I called Jenna. We talked. But she acted normal. She said she worried about me. But nothing strange had happened to her. She had no nightmares. She had no visions. Just relief that we were safe. Safe. But I wasn't. Not truly. Because sometimes, always late at night, I hear the tapping. Just outside my window. Gentle hands on glass, and a voice quietly saying my name. My old name, the one I used before that night. My camera sits in a corner, covered by a towel. I haven't developed the film. I'm too afraid. In darkness, when I dare to glance, I think I see shapes moving inside. Flickers at the edge of the frame. Tiny glowing eyes, pale faces turned toward me. Smiling. Waiting. I don't sleep well. I don't leave the apartment after dusk. I don't call friends. I'm too scared someone might answer. But I know they left something behind. And it found me. And I don't think it will ever stop. Story the end. The first time I set foot inside the park gates at nearly midnight, I told myself it was just for one final ride. The day had been long. Cresting crowds, screaming kids, lines that stretched forever, and I swore I wouldn't stay until closing. But when the lights dimmed on the last fireworks and the festive music over the loudspeakers fizzled out, I caught a glimpse of the castle lit softly beneath the moon. It looked lonely. and on impulse I slipped through a small side exit near Fantasyland, just for one ride on the carousel. I waved behind me when the security guard at the gate turned away, distracted, probably talking on his radio. Not a problem, I got it, I heard Fade. Just one ride. That was the plan. I'd grab a photo, then leave. I even told myself I would feel bad and maybe go back and confess in the morning. But the moment the heavy gates shut behind me and the crowd noise died away, the park transformed. The festive cheer drained out, the walkway lights turned amber and flickered. The laughter and chatter that had filled the air for hours was replaced with an uneasy hush that felt thick, thick and heavy, like something had closed the park doors on more than just people. The moonlight and those wavering amber bulbs cast long, shifting shadows across pavement and fencing that never felt like shadows before. Something about the way the ride machines glowed faintly, their metal cages humming quietly, was ominous. I started walking toward the carousel. The path wound past shuttered food carts, darkened ride tracks, and empty benches that smelled faintly like old popcorn and basin water mixed with dust. Under each concession stand sign, boxes and crates were stacked. Trash bins sat untouched. Zero staff. I got to the carousel gate. Chipped paint around the bars, the same worn horses in pastel whites, pinks, blues, but silent now. No music, no whirling lights, nothing but their cold fiberglass staring blankly. The padlock was wicked old, rusted but sturdy. I tried to ignore the gust of wind that whispered before I touched the lock. My fingers brushed the cold metal, twisting the padlock's clasp, and the sound was louder than expected, like a bolt sliding free. My breath hitched. Some instinct in me screamed to stop, to run, but part of me just needed to see. I lifted the latch, the door groaned, crackling like broken bones. I pointed my phone flashlight and stepped inside. The ride stood perfectly still. It had once spun music in motion, but now, silence. Mist-thin haze, like someone had sprayed air freshener months ago, lingered. The horse's eyes glowed hollow and dead in the pale light. I swallowed hard. I circled, taking pictures. My heart threatened to burst from my chest, but I forced steady breaths. One of the photo flashes, dim LED, flickered across a horse that looked like it had drooped its head slightly, as though someone had leaned on it just before everything closed. I brushed it off. I thought maybe it was my imagination. I climbed onto one horse, the white one with the golden saddle and the glassy blue eyes, and sat there, chest tight. The platform underneath creaked under my weight, just a whisper, but enough. I tried to laugh quietly. Just a stupid dare, I told myself. But standing there in that brittle silence, the air cold, I heard music, a distant lullaby. The notes were faint, melancholic, crackling, out of tune, like a music box left in the rain. I looked around, every muscle frozen. Then the carousel moved, slowly, a little jerk, just enough to rattle loose screws somewhere below. My breath left me. I gripped the golden pole, eyes wide. The platform shifted beneath me. The painted horses ahead of me moved forward, the white horse next to mine already swaying slightly. The small lights around the golden finials flickered, as though electricity tried to surge but failed. My phone's flashlight trembled in my hand. I hit record by reflex, but the screen glitched, flickered once, then static. I looked away for half a second, and when I looked back, the lights extinguished entirely. Moonlight collapsed around the carousel, and the swirling motion stopped. Blackness. I dropped my phone and scrambled off the horse. That's when I saw them. More horses. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Not just the carousel ones, but grotesque shapes around the ride. Blurred outlines swaying or standing still, too tall to be horses' elongated limbs, too much space between joints, heads angled weirdly, like bugged out. Their eyes blank, empty, shining faintly in the moonlight. I staggered backward, breath clouding in cold air. They didn't move forward, just stood, watching. No sound. Cold, I turned to run, but the gate slammed shut. Behind me, metal rattled. My mind raced. Panic exploded. I yanked at the gate. It wouldn't budge. I pounded, kicked, yelling. Silence. Then I saw her. A figure, pale skin shimmering faintly, standing in the center of the carousel platform. A woman in vintage park staff uniform. Or what looked like one, faded polka dot skirt, stacked old-style blouse, name badge, cracked. She didn't walk, she glided. The carousel lights flickered, then roared bright, briefly like a flashbulb, before plunging everything back into black. I screamed. My voice caught in my throat. I heard a breath behind me. Soft. Measured. Too close. I spun, pounding the bars. A hand materialized on the gate, bony, pale, oversized, clamps of fingers gripping metal, nails long and dirty. The hand pressed. Slowly, deliberately, another hand joined. I fell back, chest pounding, knees hit concrete. I scrambled sideways, nearly losing my footing. The hands opened the gate. Slowly. Hinges creaked. As it swung open, I thought, now's my chance. I dashed through, legs a blur, adrenaline pushing me forward. I didn't look back. I heard footsteps, soft at first like someone pacing the platform, then a high, cracking laugh. Distant, echoing. Sad, angry, like someone mourning. I ran up the path that led toward Tomorrowland. The park was dead silent again. Streetlights winked at intervals. No wind. No sound except my boots slapping pavement. I got to the roller coaster, the old, disused one with the steel tracks creaking overhead. The carriage cars sat parked. I vaulted over the metal barrier and bolted up the stairs meant for maintenance. At the top I paused. Inhale, exhale, dizzy. Above me, the night sky looked normal. Stars, moonlight, pure quiet. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to slow my pulse. I expected dogs to bark, guards to shout, but nothing. I stayed maybe a minute, time folded in fear, then crawled over the railing and dropped onto the lawn below. Pain exploded in my ankle. I bit back a scream, hopped on one foot. I landed on the concrete road and ran until I hit the stone path of Main Street. There I glimpsed the park gates only blocks away. Emergency exit near the parking lot, legendary for being barely patrolled. I didn't care if they caught me. I ran. I sprinted. Lights in the distance looked like salvation. Behind me, faint scraping, then a soft footfall, then silence. The guard at the gate was there, standing, motionless, watching, as if he had known I would come rushing. I staggered forward, my breathing ragged. I yelled, "Please, I'm sorry." He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. I nearly stepped back, but exhaustion, panic, fear, everything tangled. I urged forward and clung to the bars. "Please let me out. I won't come back." He raised one finger slowly, index straight up, and pointed at the park behind, then at himself, and then at me. I flinched. The figure in the faded staff uniform glided out of the shadows behind him, ghostly pale, half-transparent as if made of smoke. The guard's lips parted, but no sound came. The ghost looked at me, eyes hollow. She tilted her head slightly. Her mouth opened, but no words came. I felt something chill crawl through the air like wind through a tomb. Then she vanished. The guard blinked. For a moment he looked real again. Then his face stretched, mouth widening, cracking across jaws like a cracked porcelain doll. His eyes spilled darkness. I heard static hiss from the gate. The bars rattled, concrete beneath me trembled. Screams, dozens, rose from inside the park, distant but near, desperate, echoing, bone-chilling. I snapped back, pulled, kicked, crawled, slid through the gate just as the metal splintered. I half-dragged, half-stumbled out, hemorrhaged with adrenaline, pain burning hot where I scraped. I didn't look back. I heard the gate clang shut behind me, hard, final. Headlights washed over me as I stumbled onto the highway. Cold air hit my face. Tires screeched. A car swerved around me, braked harshly. Someone cursed, but didn't ask questions. I limped to a nearby convenience store, tried to call, but phone was dead. No bars, no light. I didn't know where I was. I just walked until dawn cracked across the sky. In daylight, the park looked innocent, a walled fantasy castle surrounded by empty metal fencing. Maintenance trucks idled along the back lot. A few guards drove by, faces blank or angry. When I tried to tell one of them, voice trembling, shirt stained red from scrapes, about the carousel, the gate, the ghost woman, he did nothing. Just radioed someone, looked at me like I was a crazy girl, then pointed to the exit gate. "You trespassed. Leave. Now." Shaking, limping, specters of dread still clinging to me, I left. I went straight home. My ankle swelled, bruises bloomed across my legs and arms. I cleaned the scrapes. Later that night, I lay awake. I couldn't shake the vision of those elongated shapes at the carousel. The ghost woman's face, the guard's cracked mask's smile. Days passed, I avoided mirrors. I avoided news about the park. I tried to sleep. But every night, always at 3:12 a.m., I'd wake. At first, dripping sweat, afraid I heard my own name whispered quietly. "Sarah?" Maybe dream. I tried to tell myself dream. But then I started hearing other things in my apartment. Thin footsteps in the hallway outside, despite doors being locked. Doors creaking behind me, faint scraping on walls. At times I thought I saw shadows stretch wrong, bending at angles unseen. I swore I locked every door. but the front door sometimes shifted overnight. The window ledge sometimes smelled faintly like grease paint and rust, like old animatronics. Worse, in my dreams, I was back on that carousel, the platform spinning slowly, the horse's eyes staring at me blank, and the woman in uniform standing in the center, beckoning. I got a new phone, wiped everything. But once, while texting a friend in a dark room, I held my phone up and looked into the screen's reflection. Thick black in the room, and there was someone behind me. Pale face, blurred edges, but two dark holes for eyes. I dropped the phone. Camera cracked. I told myself it was exhaustion. Then I told myself I was safe. Last week, I woke to a photo notification. On the phone I'd replaced, I hadn't taken any photos. The gallery opened itself. In the album, a single image. The carousel. And those horses. Dozens filling the frame. And on the ground in the middle, a small smear of red, like rust or blood. No ghost woman. Just the lifeless wood and metal of the ride, slick and wet. I deleted it. App uninstalled. I threw the phone in the trash. I changed apartments, changed my hair, changed my routine, but never changed the way I look around. Always curious, always scared. Because I know now, some places aren't meant to close. Once you step beyond the cheerful gates in the dead of silence, some rides never turn off. Their engines stall, but their watchers don't drift away. They wait. For someone lonely enough, foolish enough, quiet enough. Someone to take the final ride at midnight. If you ever wander past a shuttered amusement park, or if the signs say closed for maintenance, reopen tomorrow, listen. Listen for soft humming or a faint melody playing for no reason. Watch for rusted gates that don't quite lock. And if you ever slip in, even if you think no one's there, you might see eyes, hollow, watching, waiting. I tell you this not for thrill, not for a scare. I tell you so you won't go, because I don't want you to lose what you're never sure you had in the first place. Your shadow. Story the end. The sun was high in the sky as Claire and her younger brother, Tyler, approached the gates of Disneyland. Their parents had dropped them off for a day with a school friends group, and Claire felt a mix of excitement and responsibility. The park was buzzing with energy, children with Mickey ears, vendors shouting over the crowd, and the unmistakable smell of popcorn and churros filling the air. Yet as they passed under the iconic entrance arch, Claire noticed something she couldn't explain. A chill, almost like a shadow brushing over her skin, despite the blazing Californian sun. They started with Adventureland. Tyler ran ahead toward the Indiana Jones ride, Claire close behind, trying to keep an eye on him. The ride was as thrilling as always, with simulated traps and sudden drops. But as they waited in line, Claire noticed a man in an old-fashioned Disneyland uniform standing apart from the other employees. His uniform was faded almost like it belonged to the 1970s, and his name tag simply read, Mick. He didn't interact with guests, he just watched, expressionless, as if studying everyone who passed. Claire shook her head, telling herself it was just an old employee or someone doing some maintenance work. After the ride, they grabbed some ice cream and wandered toward Frontierland. Tyler was delighted by the rustic setting and the smell of roasted turkey legs. As they walked, Claire realized they'd been following a group of people through the park, all of them moving unnaturally in perfect synchronization, like actors in a stage play that didn't belong. She rubbed her eyes, but it didn't change. The group seemed almost hollow, their faces smiling too widely, too stiffly, and their eyes blank. Tyler was too busy pointing at the Mark Twain riverboat to notice. By mid-afternoon, Claire's unease grew. She suggested they visit the haunted mansion, thinking the spooky theme might be fun. The line was long, and as they waited, she noticed something odd. The lights in the queue flickered inconsistently, casting strange shadows. Then, from the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of Mick again, standing near a decorative column, staring directly at her. When she blinked, he was gone. Tyler tugged her sleeve, pointing toward the ride entrance, so she forced herself to focus on him, though her chest tightened with unease. Inside the mansion, the darkness should have been comforting in its familiarity, but something felt wrong. The animatronics seemed slightly off, moving too slowly, their eyes glinting in ways that didn't look right. Tyler clung to her arm as they progressed through the ride. Then, in the long corridor filled with portraits, Claire saw a figure, a man in the same old Disneyland uniform, standing motionless at the far end. His eyes seemed too dark, too hollow, and as she tried to point him out to Tyler, he vanished. The feeling of being watched intensified. Every twist of the ride, every sudden drop made her heart pound in a way that wasn't just excitement. After exiting the haunted mansion, Claire insisted they take a break. They found a shaded bench near a quiet path. Tyler was playing on his phone, and she tried to calm herself. But the sense of being followed didn't dissipate. Across the path, a family group passed by, and for a brief moment, she thought she saw that same hollow expression she'd noticed in the synchronized crowd earlier. Their smiles were too fixed, their heads too still. She blinked, and they melted back into the crowd, leaving her questioning her own perception. They moved toward Tomorrowland next. The futuristic rides were crowded, and Claire tried to distract Tyler by letting him choose which to go on. As they walked through the neon-lit streets, she felt it again, the lingering shadow. She turned sharply and caught a glimpse of a man with an old-style uniform peeking around a corner. His face was obscured by the brim of his hat, but she could feel his gaze penetrating her. Tyler noticed her unease. "What is it?" he asked, his voice small. She forced a laugh, shaking her head. "Nothing, just people everywhere. That's all." The group they had followed earlier reappeared in Tomorrowland. They moved in the same mechanical way, passing through the crowd as if invisible to everyone else. Claire tried to follow them with her eyes, but they always seemed to appear just a few feet ahead. Tyler tugged her hand again. "I think we should leave," she murmured, though she didn't say it aloud. Something about this park today was wrong. The usual magic had turned cold, mechanical, and sinister. As evening approached, the fireworks were scheduled. Claire and Tyler joined the crowd near Sleeping Beauty Castle. The colors exploded overhead, but the music seemed distorted, slightly slowed, and far too loud in a way that made her skin crawl. Tyler cheered, but Claire's gaze kept shifting to the crowd around them. The synchronized group had taken position nearby, standing like statues with heads tilted unnaturally, smiles too wide. She noticed shadows stretching in impossible directions, creeping toward her despite the open space. Her heart raced, and she could see Tyler glancing nervously at her, sensing her tension. When the fireworks ended, the park began to empty. Claire decided it was time to head to the exit, hoping the chaos of the crowds would mask her growing panic. But the path to Main Street felt unnaturally long, as though the park itself was shifting subtly around them. They passed empty alleyways that should have led to shops but were blocked by old props and barricades that weren't there earlier. The feeling of being watched intensified. Claire turned and glimpsed the man in the old uniform again, this time closer, standing by the edge of the street with a group of figures behind him, all frozen, all watching. Her pulse quickened. She grabbed Tyler's hand, pulling him forward. The figures remained stationary as the crowd thinned, unmoving yet undeniably present. When they reached the tram back to the parking lot, it was eerily empty. No staff, no other passengers. Claire hesitated, but Tyler was already stepping in. She followed quickly. As the tram started moving, she looked back toward the park and saw them again, the old uniformed man and the group, standing at the edge of the street, their faces obscured but their intent unmistakable. Their heads tilted in unison, an impossible, synchronized motion that made her stomach drop. Once in the car, they sped away from Disneyland, leaving the colorful lights and the distant echoes of music behind. Claire tried to reassure herself, telling Tyler it was all imagination, that the park was just big and crowded, and she was tired. Yet when they reached home, she found herself scanning every corner, every shadow, a creeping sense of dread refusing to leave. The next day, she couldn't shake the images. The synchronized group, the hollow expressions, the old uniform. She searched online and found sporadic reports, rumors mostly dismissed by the public, stories of ghost employees, families claiming to have seen motionless figures in vintage Disneyland uniforms that vanished when approached, children describing shadows that followed them through the park. None of it was confirmed, but Claire felt certain what she had seen was real. Over the following weeks, small things kept appearing. Reflections in windows showing empty hallways she had walked through, faint sounds in her apartment resembling footsteps in a rhythmic, unnatural pattern. Tyler sometimes whispered about figures near his window wearing old Disneyland hats, but he refused to explain more, afraid she wouldn't believe him. Claire didn't need proof. She could still feel the weight of that day pressing against her chest. Months later, she returned to the park with her parents, thinking a normal visit might help her move on. Disneyland looked the same, bright, cheerful, alive, but the sense of unease lingered. As she walked past Main Street, she noticed a group in vintage uniforms across the crowd. Their movements were subtly synchronized, eyes too dark, heads tilting at the same unnatural angle. She froze, a chill running down her spine. Tyler squeezed her hand. "Mom, they're back," he whispered. Claire realized, with a growing horror, that the park was never quite the same for her again. Somewhere within the colorful, joyous chaos of Disneyland, there were shadows, watching, waiting, and she could not escape them. Story the end. I split my last cigarette under the flickering street lamp outside the back gate of Disneyland. The dumpster behind the employee entrance smelled of stale popcorn and something else, odd and metallic. I crushed the butt beneath my boot, wiped my hands on my jeans, and ducked through the gate, ready for another overnight cleaning shift. Graveyard schedule. Graveyard schedule. Sweeping up after day visitors, buffing spots, emptying bins, wiping ticket booths. Just me, a mop, and a flashlight. That night, the weight of silence felt heavier than ever. When the park closed at 10, the crowds drifted out, the gates locked, and the cast members left. I checked in with the security guard, nodded at his form letter. Checklist done. All rides off. Cameras recording. Then, he locked the door behind me. The ride speakers, the trams, the chatter of families, everything went off at once. In that moment, the silence seemed unnatural, like the world had exhaled and then held its breath. I walked down Main Street, past shuttered shops and locked display windows. The lights on the old-fashioned lampposts cast long shadows, comforting in daylight, eerie late at night. I passed a broom aside the entrance of the classic arcade. The broom had been already used. Strange. I glanced around, no sign of the night crew. I checked my phone, no messages. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" Only the echo returned. I shrugged and turned to begin my first round, sweeping the area in front of the old-timey ticket booths, collecting stray popcorn scraps near the trash barrels. The night air was heavy, humid, muggy from leftover warmth of the crowd and the animatronic machinery still slightly warm from the day's use. Occasionally, a distant creak echoed. A swing of a door, maybe just metal cooling and contracting, I thought. About an hour later, I reached the gates near Frontierland. Normally, this section was complete for maintenance later, but there was a stray ride car, one from the old mule ride wagon attraction, parked halfway down the track. That shouldn't happen. After hours, those cars always parked fully in their barn, locked inside. I stared at it under the sodium yellow street lamp. The wagon looked dusty, but intact. I felt a chill, but shrugged again. Must be someone from the maintenance crew had left it. I made a note. I'd report it at the end of shift. Further in, I passed the old Opera House, closed off for renovation decades ago. Its entrance boarded up, a sign supposedly warning of hazards. The boards looked older tonight, edges rotting. As I swept, my flashlight flickered. I cursed, tapped the side. It steadied. Then, in that brief darkness, I thought I saw something move behind the boards. A pale, small arm, finger bones bony and long, reaching through a crack. My throat closed. I moved closer, shining the light. Nothing. Just darkness behind wood. I shook my head. Imagination. At 1:15 a.m., I cleaned near the bridge over the small canal by Fantasyland. The water was still, black like ink. The boats were pulled up against the dock, chained and silent. I swept around the dock, piling old flyers from last day's visitors into a plastic bag. I bumped the bag. It clattered. The sound echoed across the water. For a moment, the canal's surface shimmered, not from wind, but as if something beneath had stirred. I paused. The air felt colder suddenly. I exhaled, my breath visible in a thin mist, though it shouldn't have been. I stamped my foot. The bridge groaned. "Just a draft," I muttered, but then a soft giggle drifted across the water. Low, childish. My spine froze. I shined my flashlight across the canal. Nothing. I dared not breathe. The giggle came again. Closer. From the boats. I took a shaky step forward. I saw one of the small rowboats rocking, but no wind. No one aboard. The rope had slackened. The boat drifted slowly out like something pushed it. I flicked the flashlight toward the boat. My light revealed charred wood, as though the boat had caught fire some time ago, but now soaked and black with water. And inside, on the seat nearest to me, there lay a child's doll. a tattered doll with hollow, glassy eyes, its dress soaked and stained a dull rust color. I felt bile rise in my mouth. I backed away. Without warning, the water beside the boat shivered like a ripple, except there was no wind. The doll rolled, just a little, as if nudged by an invisible finger. The giggling turned into a soft whisper, distant. Come, come, play. The tone was childish, but there was something broken, wounded in it. I could feel sorrow behind the voice, and something else. Possessiveness. My brain told me to run. My body did not obey. I stood transfixed. The bridge groaned again. My flashlight flickered, went out. For a long moment I existed in total darkness. Then a single pale face brightened briefly on the water. Large black eyes, hollow. The pale face stared directly at me, mouth stretched in a silent scream. In that instant I heard a whisper right beside my ear. Stay. I bolted. First I tried to run across the bridge, but my foot slipped on wet wood. I twisted awkwardly, fell hard as my flashlight dropped into the water with a splash. I heard the doll thump softly. I scrambled up, adrenaline coursing. The canal water rippled, the surface rising as though something beneath reached up, dark tendrils winding around the oarlocks of the other boats. I turned and sprinted toward Fantasyland proper, wading through narrow alleys between closed-ride facades. In the gloom I saw long shadows. Shadows not cast by the lampposts, but standing still, motionless. I skirted them, my heart hammering, praying none would shift. I reached the carousel approach, where the giant spires of the fake fairy tale houses jutted up. The park map said no staff should cross there at night alone. Everyone avoided the area after midnight except security, which I was, in a sense, but I had no radio. The guard remained long gone. I moved fast, turned a corner, wincing at the sound of dripping metal, and came to what looked like the facade of a candy shop from decades past. Peeling pastel paint, boarded windows, a faded wooden sign that once said "Sweet Dreams." I passed the door. Behind me, something banged hard, wooden board swinging back to its frame as if struck. I dared not look. My lungs burned. I burned with fright. Just as I cleared the building, I stepped into the courtyard near the old castle. The Magic Kingdom? Spire rising tall, dim lights from inside shimmering through stained glass windows far above. That's when I heard footsteps, soft, padding shoes on cobblestones. One footstep, then another. Then a faint chorus, muted as if many small children were shuffling across the square. I crawled behind a decorative lamppost, pressed flat against the stone. I dared not breathe. The footsteps moved around, circling. Laughter, low and childlike, overlapping in layers. Soft, mocking, playful. Desperate. The voices whispered names, over and again, but none I recognized. They sounded like old nicknames, voices creaking, rustling, like cloth scraping against gravel. One voice, distinct and clear, said my name. I froze. My name, faint but unmistakable. The hairs on my neck stood straight up. I shut my eyes. When I opened them, an old ride car of a horse carriage from a long-closed attraction rolled slowly across the courtyard, by itself, wheels creaking. Its rider seat empty. There was no line, no track operator, but it moved. In the dim light, the carriage looked antique, rusted, worn, as though for decades it had lain unused. Now it rounded the corner and rolled toward me, quiet, methodical, gliding over stone. I tried to step back, stubbed my toe. Pain stung. The carriage crept closer. I expected a ghostly driver, pale in rags, but there was no one. Only the carriage, empty. The silence felt suffocating, thick. Then the carriage stopped, about 15 feet away, and the laughter stopped too. Dead silence. The courtyard felt like vacuum, just me in that carriage and the height of the castle above. I waited, body trembling. Then the carriage door swung open with a long groan. I stared, unbelieving. A soft wind, albeit impossible, drifted from inside, carrying the faint scent of old sugar carrots and stale cotton candy, the smell of stale popcorn mingled with mildew and rust. A pale hand reached out, gripping the door frame, slender, bones thin, skin chalk white, fingers unreal, as though painted on. The hand was small, a child's hand. I turned and ran, faster than I ever had in my life. The lampposts, the kiosks, the painted ride facades blurred. I vaulted over trash bins. I leaped past stacks of empty ride cars. I heard nothing behind me. No chase, no footfalls, only silence, but I didn't dare look back. The gate loomed ahead. Heavy metal barrier between the world inside and outside. I ran into it, slammed my shoulder. The impact knocked me down. Stunned, I scrambled for the latch. My hands shook. I lifted the metal bar up. It moved slowly, stiffly, as though something pressed against it. Dimly, I saw a blurred figure beyond, just a shape, small, blurred. My vision narrowed, panic constricted my chest. I shoved the gate open, tumbling out into the alley behind. I leaned against the wall, gasping, drenched in sweat. My flashlight lay at my feet. The small doll from the canal rolled near my foot. Wood dark now, water-soaked, eyes black. I stared at it, then kicked it aside, away from me. I didn't dare touch it. The alley was empty, the dumpsters silent. The city beyond was dark, quiet. No neon, no crowds. I was alone, just me, dust and the smell of the night. At dawn, I quit. I threw away my cleaning uniform, deleted the number of the guard I'd checked in with, and drove out of Anaheim without a look back. For months, I didn't speak of it. I didn't tell friends. I didn't try to dig deeper. I didn't want to know. But the nightmares came. I dreamt of small footsteps echoing across stone courtyards, of pale hands pressed against windows, clawing to get out. I woke covered in sweat, heart pounding. I once saw the doll in a grocery aisle, leaning against a shelf. I dropped my basket and ran without paying. I checked the rearview mirror later that night. I swore a shadow moved on its own in the back seat. My headlights flickered. The radio crackled static. I changed towns. I changed states. I got a new job, a grocery store clerk by day, deliveries at night. But I could never fix my dreams. I could never rid the sense, the conviction that I was being watched. I tore down posters in my apartment, threw old photos away, blocked numbers on my phone. But every once in a while, always just as I'm drifting off, I hear footsteps, soft and pattering in the dark, laughing, whispering names I don't quite catch. I still see the face, sometimes in reflections on dark windows. Pale face, hollow eyes, mouth stretched like a scream. I don't recognize the face, but something about it feels familiar, too familiar. I can still smell the faint scent of cotton candy and mildew. In the darkest hours of night, I can still hear that whisper, gentle and pleading. Come. Play. I don't go near amusement parks anymore. I don't walk near bridges over water after dusk. I don't pass old barns or closed gates or boarded-up entrances. I don't even drive near Anaheim. I sold my truck. I rarely open the blinds after sunset. When I close my eyes, I can still see that empty carriage slowly gliding across the courtyard under the castle's facade, gone like smoke, yet somehow real. The last thing I remember before everything went black was that carriage door slowly swinging open, and something soft, wet, pressing against the gate just as I pushed it open. I don't know what it was or who, but I know what I felt. I know what I saw. And I know what followed me when I left. If you ever wander through an amusement park after dark and the crowd has gone, the lights are dim and the ride's silent, remember, some attractions never sleep. Some shadows are alive. Some stories don't end. Story the end. It was mid-July when I first went to Disneyland without my parents. I was 19, had just finished my first year of college, and my best friend Ryan had convinced me to take a road trip down from San Francisco to Anaheim. We wanted the full adventure, the kind where we slept in cheap motels, ate greasy food, and stayed until the park closed. Disneyland was supposed to be magical, fun, and a distraction from our growing anxiety over adult responsibilities. I didn't expect it to be terrifying. We arrived mid-afternoon, the sun beating down on the parking lot, asphalt radiating heat like a griddle. The tram ride into the park was crowded with families, but Ryan and I found seats in the back. He kept fiddling with his camera, trying to capture every angle of the entrance. He wanted photos of the castle, the Main Street buildings, even the fake horse-drawn carriages. I was more focused on the people, the cast members smiling too wide, the lines of children tugging at their parents, the ever-present hum of happiness. Our first ride was Space Mountain. I loved roller coasters, and the idea of being in darkness while rocketing through the stars was exhilarating. We strapped in, and the familiar countdown began. The ride shot us into blackness, stars flashing past as we twisted and turned. For a moment, it was perfect. Then I noticed something off. A shadow in the darkness, distinct from the projected stars. A figure, tall, lanky, standing in the middle of a corridor we were supposedly passing through. I blinked, and it was gone. Ryan didn't see it. He was too busy screaming and laughing. I tried to shake it off, blaming it on the lights, the speed, the overstimulation. Next, we headed to the Haunted Mansion. Ryan had convinced me that it was a fun scare, nothing serious. We joined the line, which wasn't too long. The air was hot, sticky, and smelled faintly of popcorn and damp concrete. As we moved into the stretching room, the usual fake portrait stretched upward, but behind the regular images, I caught movement. Shadows that didn't match the mannequins, a figure standing at the corner of the room, wet hair, pale skin, and eyes that seemed to glow faintly. I leaned toward Ryan and whispered, "Did you see that?" He shook his head. "See what?" By the time we boarded the doom buggy, the feeling of being watched had grown stronger. The ride moved through the usual scenes, and everything appeared normal until we approached the attic. There was the bride, spinning slowly, but behind her, in the corner of the room, was a man. Not an animatronic, not a cast member, just a man wearing a soaked suit, face pale as if he hadn't seen sunlight in weeks, hair hanging limply over his forehead. He looked straight at me. I froze. Ryan laughed nervously, trying to lighten the mood, but I couldn't move. The man blinked once, slowly, deliberately, and then he was gone, as if he had never been there. I wanted to leave, but Ryan was determined. He said we had to see everything, ride everything, stay until the park closed. By late evening, the crowds had thinned and the lights had taken on a golden glow. I thought maybe things would feel safer in the Main Street area, with people around. We wandered toward It's a Small World. I hated that ride. Something about the endless repetition of the song, the lifeless dolls, the pastel colors, always made me uneasy. But Ryan insisted. The line wasn't long, maybe 20 minutes. As we boarded the boat, I tried to relax. The first few rooms were normal, even cheerful. The dolls moved in time, singing their perpetual song. But then, as we passed the halfway point, the music warped. Not the typical mechanical glitch, but slowed down, deep and distorted, like a record played underwater. The lights flickered. All the dolls froze, all except one. A small doll near the back, in a corner partially hidden by a painted mountain, turned its head slowly toward us. Its face wasn't painted right. The smile was crooked and the eyes seemed glossy and wet, almost alive. The arm lifted fluidly, not like a mechanical joint, and pointed directly at our boat. Ryan didn't notice. Emily, no, Ryan was too distracted laughing at the other dolls. I tried to tell myself it was a trick of the light, my imagination running wild from heat and stress. Then the speakers screamed. A high-pitched, human scream, completely unlike anything in the ride's programming. Kids in our boat started crying, some parents murmuring reassurances. I gripped the edge of the boat, heart hammering. When we moved past the doll, I noticed something red on the water. Not paint. Blood, thick and dark. It dripped silently into the ride's shallow pool, trailing behind us like a river of ink. The rest of the ride passed without incident. The dolls resumed motion, the music returned, and the water appeared normal again. But the image of that doll, the scream, and the blood stayed burned into my mind. We tried to shake it off. Ryan wanted to see the fireworks. I didn't want to, but I didn't argue. From a distance, Disneyland looked magical. The castle glimmered, the lights sparkled, and people laughed, oblivious. That's when I saw her again. A woman in a drenched white dress, hair plastered to her face, standing perfectly still among the crowd. She wasn't moving with the people, wasn't reacting to the music, the lights, or the laughter. She stared straight at me. I froze. Emily, again Ryan, didn't see her. The moment I blinked, she vanished. After the fireworks, we left. The park was mostly empty. The tram ride back to the parking lot was quiet. Only a few people scattered around. I kept looking around, expecting her to appear. When we reached the car, a puddle of water had formed behind it, slowly expanding. I froze, staring at it. Then movement in the reflection of the rearview mirror caught my eye. A shadow, a shape, standing there, watching. I jumped in the car, locked the doors, and drove out. Ryan was laughing, unaware. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the pale woman, the blood, the doll's glossy eyes. Weeks later, I told Ryan about the sightings. He laughed, assumed I had been overtired or too dehydrated in the heat, but I knew what I saw. Disneyland wasn't just rides and magic. Something had followed me that day, something that wasn't bound by the park's walls, schedules, or rules. Sometimes late at night, when the house is dark and quiet, I hear it. The faint drip of water, like something trailing behind me. And when I glance toward the window, I sometimes think I see a shape outside, hair plastered to a pale face, standing silently, just watching. I've never gone back. Story the end. I never thought Disneyland could feel like anything other than magical, but that summer changed everything. I was 22, freshly out of college, and my friends and I decided to go to California for a week-long vacation. There were five of us: me, my roommate Tyler, his girlfriend Sarah, my childhood friend Jake, and his sister Emily. We all grew up watching Disney movies, going to theme parks, dreaming about this trip. We thought it would be fun, carefree, and exactly the kind of trip you see in movies. The first 2 days were everything you expect from Disneyland: long lines, sunburns, overpriced churros, and constant laughter. But there was something off. At first, it was subtle, a feeling in the pit of my stomach when we walked down Main Street, USA, as if we weren't supposed to be there, as if someone or something was watching. I chalked it up to nerves and excitement, the overstimulation of the park. On the third day, we decided to try something less crowded: the Indiana Jones adventure. It was midday, and the line was about an hour long. I remember noticing an older man standing behind us. He was tall, wearing a beige vest and a faded fedora that looked like it belonged in the 1980s. That alone didn't bother me. Disneyland attracts all sorts of tourists. But there was something unnerving about how still he was. He wasn't looking around, smiling at kids, or taking photos. He just stared at us. His eyes were locked on me, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. I whispered to Tyler, "Do you see that guy behind us?" He looked back briefly and shrugged. "Probably just another tourist." But it wasn't like any tourist I had ever seen. His posture was rigid, almost unnatural, and the way he focused on me felt deliberate. I tried to shake it off as paranoia. The ride itself was exhilarating, but when we came out, the man was gone. I told the group about him, and Jake laughed. "Maybe you're imagining things, man. You've been staring at animatronics for an hour. Your brain's fried." We laughed it off, but the unease lingered. That evening, after fireworks, we went to grab dinner at one of the restaurants on Main Street. It was crowded, and we had to split up to find seating. I ended up sitting near a window, watching the crowd outside. That's when I saw him again, the same man from the ride. He was standing across the street, completely still, staring right at me. I froze. My stomach twisted. For a moment, I thought he might be someone from the cast, maybe a performer in a costume I didn't recognize. But his face, it didn't fit the Disneyland aesthetic. It was pale, sharp-featured, almost gaunt. He wasn't smiling. He didn't blink. He just stared. I tried to focus on something else, but when I glanced back, he had moved closer. I didn't notice him walking. He was just there, standing closer, still staring. My hands shook as I texted Tyler to come over. When he arrived, I pointed him out, but the man was gone. There was no one there. No trace, just the normal crowd bustling past. I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. Maybe a trick of shadows, maybe a figment of my imagination. Megan and I weren't seeing the same thing. I didn't even tell the rest of the group. I didn't want them thinking I was crazy. That night, in our hotel room, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing that face, rigid and unblinking. I woke up several times, convinced I saw shadows moving along the walls. I told myself it was the city lights, the heat, anything but what I feared. The next day, we went to Adventureland again. We thought if we stuck together and stayed in the crowded areas, the feeling would pass. But as we approached the tiki room, I felt it again, that same chilling sensation of being watched. While waiting in line, Emily nudged me. "Why are you looking so freaked out?" I shook my head. "I don't know, just a weird vibe." She frowned. "You've been like this since yesterday. Maybe you need to relax." I tried, really tried. But when we stepped into the tiki room, I felt a shift in the air. The usual mechanical singing of birds and tropical voices sounded distorted, like it was being whispered just for me. The shadows of the animatronic birds seemed longer, moving independently, almost as if they were alive. I tried to laugh it off, but the feeling of someone behind me made my skin crawl. I turned slightly, and there he was again. The man. Only now, he wasn't in a costume. He was wearing modern clothes, a black jacket and jeans, but the same gaunt face, the same unblinking stare. He stood at the edge of the line, not interacting with anyone, not speaking, just staring. I whispered to Jake, "Do you see him?" Jake looked, then shook his head. "Who?" I turned back, but he was gone. By the fourth day, I was terrified. I started noticing things that didn't make sense. People in the background would disappear when I looked directly at them. The crowd seemed too fluid, moving in strange patterns, and always there was that feeling like someone was just out of sight, following me. We went on rides, tried to stay in well-lit areas, kept close together, but the man appeared more frequently. I saw him on the monorail, standing outside the train, walking along the railing, never moving closer, but always in the corner of my vision. It got worse in the evening. We decided to watch Phantasmic on the Rivers of America. The show started, and I tried to focus on the lights, the music, the explosions of water and fire, but I couldn't stop seeing him, standing on the far side of the park, just beyond the reach of the crowd. He was tall, gaunt, staring directly at me, motionless. During a moment of darkness in the show, he was closer, standing near the edge of the viewing area, completely alone. When the lights came back up, I turned, and he was gone again. I started documenting everything. Notes in my phone, pictures, videos. But strangely, every time I reviewed them later, he wasn't in any of the footage. Not a trace. It was like he was there only for me. By the 5th day, I couldn't take it anymore. I told the group I wanted to leave early. Megan and Sarah were upset. They wanted to stay, but I insisted. The feeling of being watched had escalated into terror. Every shadow, every reflection in windows or water, every figure in the crowd set my nerves on edge. On the way out, as we walked down Main Street for the last time, I saw him one final time. He was standing near the castle, almost blending in with the shadows, but his face was unmistakable. The gaunt, pale features, unblinking eyes, staring at me. I froze. He didn't move, didn't smile, didn't blink, and then just as suddenly as he appeared, he was gone. We left Disneyland, got on the shuttle to the airport, and I thought maybe I could breathe again. But even now, back home in Michigan, I still feel him sometimes. In reflections, in shadows, in the edge of my vision. I don't know who he was or why he followed me. All I know is that Disneyland, the happiest place on earth, wasn't just magical. It was terrifying in ways I'll never forget. I've never returned, and I don't think I ever will. Story the end. It was the summer after college when my friends and I decided to go to Disneyland. We had grown up going as kids, but this was going to be our first time as adults. There were 5 of us, me, Jenna, Mike, Sam, and Lisa, and we were determined to make it a full day from opening until closing. We rented a small Airbnb a few blocks away to avoid the expensive on-site hotels and were up before sunrise, buzzing with the excitement of being back in the park. The park was already packed when we arrived, but the early morning crowd was still manageable. We ran straight to Space Mountain, laughed through rides, and ate way too much churros. Everything was typical Disneyland magic, until the sun started to dip behind the castle. That's when things started to feel different. It wasn't anything obvious at first, just a subtle shift in atmosphere. The cheerful chatter of families seemed more forced, the smiles on performers' faces a little too rigid. The park lights flickered briefly, but everyone around us seemed to ignore it. I remember feeling a chill, even though it was a hot July evening, and shrugged it off as my imagination. We decided to split up briefly to hit different rides before the nighttime parade. Sam and Lisa wanted to go on the Haunted Mansion again, while Mike, Jenna, and I wandered toward Adventureland. I had a bad feeling about the mansion, but they insisted, so I let them go. I remember checking my phone to see how far they were. There was no signal. That struck me as strange. Disney is usually flawless with coverage. I tried calling Sam, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted. No reply. Just as I was about to shrug it off again, I noticed something unusual about the crowd. A man in a tattered costume, almost like an old-timey mascot suit, was standing near the entrance to the ride. I hadn't seen him before in the park, and his movements were stiff, jerky, almost robotic. His head tilted unnaturally, and he seemed to be staring directly at me, though he didn't move closer. I shook it off and focused on Adventureland, figuring the others were fine. We rode the Jungle Cruise and the Indiana Jones ride. All the animatronics seemed normal, but occasionally I'd catch a shadow moving oddly in the corner of my eye. Once, on Indiana Jones, I could have sworn a figure was sitting in one of the cars behind us, completely still, head tilted, not moving a muscle. I looked back after we got off the ride. Nothing. As night fell, we regrouped near the central hub for the parade. Sam and Lisa hadn't returned yet. I tried calling again. Still nothing. Jenna and Mike joked that they were probably stuck on a ride or somewhere lost in the crowds, but I could see a flicker of unease in their eyes. We waited. 10 minutes. 15. Still nothing. Finally, I suggested we go check the haunted mansion ourselves. It didn't feel right to just wait. When we arrived at the entrance, it was eerily quiet. No lines, no music. The fog machine was off. The usually vibrant Halloween overlay seemed muted and dim, like someone had turned the brightness down. I called Sam and Lisa again. No answer. The cast member at the entrance gave us a polite nod, but something was off. His uniform looked outdated, like something from the 80s, and his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Enjoy your visit," he said in a monotone voice, then stepped aside. The doors creaked open, and we stepped in. The interior seemed different. The usual ghostly orchestra was faint, distorted, almost underwater. The portraits on the walls flickered strangely, some of the faces elongating unnaturally. I tried to laugh it off, but Mike grabbed my arm. "Do you see that?" he whispered. Ahead, the ride vehicles were moving, but there were no people in them. The ghosts were wrong. Their eyes seemed too bright, their smiles too wide, and they didn't move fluidly like the animatronics we knew. They jerked in place, twitching like puppets with tangled strings. I felt my stomach tighten. We moved further in, trying to find a cast member or someone to explain what was going on. Then I saw them, Sam and Lisa, or at least two figures in the back rooms, standing perfectly still, staring directly at us. Their faces were blank, their bodies stiff. I called their names, but they didn't respond. Suddenly, the ride jolted violently, throwing us against the sides. The lights flickered, then went out completely. Complete darkness. Only the faint glow of the ghostly eyes remained, scattered around the room. I tried to reach for Mike, but I couldn't see him. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst through my chest. A whisper brushed past my ear. "Enjoy the journey." I spun around. No one. The whisper repeated, now all around us, echoing off walls we shouldn't have been able to hear it from. The vehicles started moving again, faster this time, the track groaning under an unnatural weight. The ghosts weren't animatronics anymore. They were alive, somehow. Their mouths moved without sound, stretching unnaturally, reaching toward us with fingers too long. We tried to run, but the exit doors weren't where they should have been. Every turn led us deeper into darkness. I could hear faint scratching behind walls, like something was moving just beyond the painted scenery. I was screaming for Sam and Lisa, but only the distorted whispers answered. The ride seemed endless. Every scene repeated itself with subtle wrong differences. Portraits with extra eyes, chandeliers hanging upside down, shadows that moved against the light. And then I saw Sam, closer now, but her face was pale, eyes wide and unblinking. She raised a hand, but when she did, the fingers bent backward at impossible angles. I couldn't take it anymore. I screamed, pounding on the ride vehicle, demanding it stop. And then, as suddenly as it began, we were outside, standing in a service alley behind the attraction. The neon glow of Main Street was visible in the distance, normal and cheerful, but everything around us was quiet, almost sterile. We ran toward the main park, but there was no one. No crowd, no music, no characters, just the empty streets and the faint smell of popcorn. I called out for Sam and Lisa again. No answer. When we reached the exit, security met us. They told us the haunted mansion had been closed for repairs all day. Sam and Lisa were never scanned entering the ride. The cast member we had seen at the entrance hadn't been employed in decades. I called the police. I called their phones. Days passed with no sign of them. It was like they had vanished into thin air. I've returned to Disneyland since then, but I never go near that ride, never go into the old parts of the park after dark. Sometimes late at night, I dream I'm back there. The whispers call my name. I see figures in the shadows, faces stretched, eyes too bright. And the last thing I hear before waking up is always the same. Enjoy the journey. Even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling that the park remembers, that it holds them somewhere inside, trapped behind walls the public never sees. And sometimes I catch glimpses of them in the crowd, blank faces staring just long enough before disappearing again. I don't know what happened to Sam and Lisa. I don't know if they're alive. But I know one thing. Disneyland isn't always magic, and some journeys don't end when the ride stops. Story, the end. It was mid-June when my friends and I decided to go to Disneyland. We were all in college, 21, eager for a weekend of rides, pictures, and souvenirs. I had been there once as a kid, but nothing had prepared me for the eeriness that would unfold over those 2 days. We arrived in the late morning, parking in the sprawling lot that smelled faintly of gasoline and sunscreen. The air was sticky, heavy with the excitement of summer crowds. Everyone was laughing, talking about which rides we wanted to hit first. I was with my closest friends, Jenna, Mark, and Tyler. None of us were particularly sensitive to creepiness or horror stories. We were just looking for fun. At first, it was perfect. The lines were long, but we passed the time with jokes and selfies. The parade was dazzling, and I swear I could almost forget the odd feeling I had walking under the towering structures and enormous brightly painted facades. The employees were friendly as usual, but sometimes they smiled a little too long, held their gaze a moment too long, and I chalked it up to the strict Disney training. It was during our fourth ride that the unease began. We had decided to go on the Haunted Mansion. I had been on it before, of course, and it was always fun, dark, spooky, but playful. The line was long, but the atmosphere was incredible. Cobwebs, cackling voices, flickering lights. But as we edged closer to the loading area, I noticed something odd. The cast member at the ride entrance didn't look right. Not in a costume way, he was wearing the normal uniform, but he was too still, too stiff, like he was a mannequin. His eyes didn't blink. He scanned us briefly, then nodded mechanically, motioning for us to board. I mentioned it to Jenna quietly. "He's just tired," she said. "I guess," I said, but I didn't feel convinced. We boarded the ride, and at first everything was normal. The stretching room, the eerie portraits, the glow-in-the-dark ghosts. But then, as the doom buggies moved along the track, I noticed a figure at the edge of my peripheral vision. Something crouched in a corner, just behind one of the pillars in the stretching room. I turned my head quickly, but nothing was there. I chalked it up to nerves. The room was dark, and my eyes were probably playing tricks. The ride continued. The ghostly ballroom was crowded with dancing spirits, but something about them felt wrong. They were moving in ways that didn't seem quite natural. Their heads sometimes snapped too quickly. Their arms jerked in ways that didn't match the rhythm of their dancing. And the laughter, it was faint but distinctly human, layered beneath the usual spooky soundtrack. Then we reached the attic scene. Normally the bride figure would sway slightly as lightning flashed. This time, she turned her head completely, staring directly at me with glossy eyes. Her mouth opened, and I could swear she whispered my name. "Mark." I froze. Tyler laughed nervously beside me. "You hearing that too?" Or, "No, probably just the sound effects," I muttered. But I knew it wasn't the sound effects. The ride ended abruptly after that. The doors opened, and the usual cheerful voice welcomed us to exit. But when we got off, something felt off. The exit area was almost empty. The attendants were gone. The usual background music was missing. Instead, a low hum filled the air, soft, constant, like distant machinery. We laughed nervously, trying to shake it off, and headed toward the next ride, Pirates of the Caribbean. The park was crowded, but the weird tension seemed to follow us. The performers and staff moved with that same unnatural stiffness I had noticed before. Some of them would pause mid-step, staring blankly ahead before resuming their movements. Pirates itself was worse than Haunted Mansion. The ride started normally. The gentle boat ride, the animatronic pirates singing and fighting. But in the first cave scene, I noticed a figure that didn't belong. It was crouched in the shadows, just beyond the flickering torchlight. At first, I thought it was a guest dressed in dark clothing, but as we passed, I realized it wasn't moving the way a human should. Its limbs were slightly bent at odd angles, and its head swiveled unnaturally. Tyler nudged me, whispering, "Dude, see that?" I nodded, but I didn't respond. I couldn't take my eyes off it. The figure vanished as we moved deeper into the ride, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was following us. The animatronics, the pirates, seemed to glitch slightly, their movements stuttering, their voices distorted for a fraction of a second. When the ride ended, I noticed that the exit corridor was dimmer than normal, shadows stretching longer than they should. We were already on edge, but nothing could have prepared us for what happened after dinner. We decided to walk through Fantasyland to kill time before fireworks. The area was more crowded now, but something felt wrong. The bright colors of the buildings were almost too bright, the cheerful music playing on loop but slightly off pitch, as if slowed down. A parade was beginning, and we stood near the edge of the path. As the floats passed, I noticed a performer dressed as Mickey Mouse moving differently than the others. His head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and his gestures were jerky, like he was a puppet being controlled by someone with too little experience. Then he turned and pointed directly at me. I laughed nervously. "Okay, that's creepy," I whispered to Jenna. "Just part of the show," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. As the parade moved on, I noticed more figures, not performers, not guests, standing along the edges, all motionless, staring. They wore dark clothing, and their faces were obscured by shadows. When we passed, some of them would step slightly, but always in the same jerky, unnatural manner. The fireworks began, and everyone's attention was drawn to the sky. I tried to shake off the feeling of being watched, but I couldn't. The shadows remained at the edges of my vision. We left the park that night, exhausted and uneasy. The motel room should have been a relief, but the unease followed us. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the air conditioner sounded like footsteps. Every shadow seemed to twitch unnaturally. In the middle of the night, I woke to a soft tapping. At first, I thought it was the rain against the window, but there was no rain. The sound moved around the room, light and deliberate, like fingernails tapping on a table. I sat up and saw a dark figure crouched in the corner. It was small, maybe the size of a child, with two long limbs and a face that was impossible to make out in the dim light. Its head turned slowly toward me, and I felt, without understanding how, that it knew my name. I yelled, flipping on the lights. The figure was gone. The next morning, we drove home in silence. None of us mentioned the park, not at first. We tried to rationalize what we had seen: heat exhaustion, stress, overactive imagination, but none of us could shake the feeling of being followed even after we left Anaheim. 2 weeks later, I received a package in the mail. There was no return address. Inside was a small doll, one of the Haunted Mansion ghosts, the bride figure. Its head was slightly turned, its glassy eyes staring directly at me. I had no idea how it got there. I threw it away. The next day, it was back on my desk. I never went back to Disneyland. None of my friends did. Sometimes at night, I hear faint footsteps in my apartment, soft and hollow, like the sound of gears turning slowly. Occasionally, I see small shadows moving in the corner of my vision. I tell myself it's nothing. I try to laugh it off, but sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I swear I hear it whisper my name, and I know that if I ever went back, I would see those eyes again, waiting, watching, patient. Story the end. It was my first solo trip to Disneyland. I was 24, fresh out of college and trying to reclaim some of my childhood excitement before life swallowed me in full-time work. I'd been saving for months, meticulously planning the perfect day, and now I stood outside the gates in the morning sun, ticket in hand. The place was alive with energy, kids laughing, music drifting over the crowd, the smell of churros and popcorn mingling with the faint tang of sunscreen. Everything was normal. Everything was cheerful. Or so I thought. I started at Adventureland. The Jungle Cruise was my first stop, mainly because it was a slow ride and gave me time to acclimate to the crowds. I remember noticing something odd as I walked up to the docked boats. One of the ride vehicles was empty, completely still, and positioned halfway down the water channel as if it had stopped mid-ride. Maintenance workers were nowhere in sight. I shrugged it off. Disneyland had weird timing with their ride resets sometimes. I stepped into my boat, trying to shake off the feeling that someone or something was watching me. The ride started, and I drifted past animatronic animals and tribal figures. The usual jokes from the skipper played over the speakers, but I noticed something different. The animals weren't moving as fluidly as I remembered. A crocodile snapped its jaw stiffly, missing its mark, and the hippos in the water twitched in awkward, jerky motions. The air smelled damp, like stagnant water. I assumed it was the humidity mixed with old animatronic oil. Then I saw her. A little girl standing on the edge of the jungle, motionless. She was dressed in a faded yellow dress, clinging to a stuffed animal, staring directly at me. Her hair was wet and plastered to her face. For a moment, I thought it was part of the set, a new figure they'd added to the ride. But her eyes, they moved. She blinked slowly, deliberately, following my boat. I squinted. There was no movement from her mouth, but she tilted her head unnaturally, as if calculating something. The scene behind her was normal, trees and rocks and fake vines, but she didn't belong there. I told myself I was imagining it. The sun was reflecting off the water, playing tricks on my eyes. I shook my head and turned forward, trying to focus on the skipper's narration. But then I heard it, a soft, wet whisper from behind me. "Don't leave." I froze. My heart hammered. No one else was in the boat. The voice was faint but unmistakable. I whipped around, expecting maybe a lost child had fallen in or someone was playing a prank, but the boat was empty except for me. I told myself again I was imagining it. Disneyland was a sensory overload. Maybe I'd read too many horror stories online. Maybe the combination of the humidity, the sun, and the mechanical sounds was making my brain hallucinate. But the whisper came again, louder this time, urgent. "Don't leave. Stay." The boat lurched forward, and I nearly fell out of my seat. My hands gripped the edges tightly. I scanned the water channel, the animatronics, the rock formations, and the plants, but nothing moved except the mechanical animals. Then I saw them. Dolls. Not the ride's usual figures, not the polished animatronics. These were small, plastic, human-like dolls. They floated just under the waterline, perfectly still like they were watching me. Some had limbs missing, others had faces scratched off, but all of them were positioned so that their gaze seemed fixed on me. And when the boat tilted, I swear one of them turned its head. I leaned closer to the water to see if I could catch my reflection. Maybe my brain was playing tricks. But the dolls weren't floating randomly. They were arranged in patterns, circles, lines, triangles. They followed the boat. I felt something brush my leg. My skin crawled. I whipped my head around. Nothing. Just the empty boat and the water glinting under the sunlight. By the time we reached the halfway point, the ride slowed unnaturally, like it had hit a snag. The skipper's voice faltered and distorted. Ladies and gentlemen, please hold on." The boat shuddered. Water sloshed, and I saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the channel, tall, impossibly thin, wearing a white uniform. Its face was obscured by a brimmed hat, but I could see the hands, long and pale, clutching the railing. It tilted its head in a way no human could, and then it began to move toward the water. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My body refused. The figure slipped into the water, moving unnaturally fast. The water around it rippled, though there was no splash. The dolls beneath the surface shifted, clustering around it, forming some kind of formation I couldn't comprehend. I finally screamed, and my voice echoed weirdly, distorted as if the water itself swallowed it. The boat jerked violently. The skipper's voice shouted over the chaos, but the sound was warped, as though coming from underwater. I saw the little girl again. She had moved closer, standing on a small rock, wet hair plastered to her face, staring at me with those blank, calculating eyes. The stuffed animal was gone. Her mouth opened slightly this time, and I heard the words clearly. "Don't leave." The boat lurched again, and I grabbed the sides, trying to force my shaking legs to move. Then the figure from the water rose fully, taller than the tallest animatronic, skin glistening wet, limbs bending in ways they shouldn't. Its hat fell into the water, revealing a blank, featureless face. No eyes, no mouth, nothing. Just a smooth, pale surface that reflected the dim light. It moved toward me, slow and deliberate, and the dolls swirled around it like a current. The water was rising rapidly, sloshing into the boat. I grabbed the emergency rope, trying to pull myself out, but the water was pulling against me, dragging me back. I screamed June's name, my niece. Not that she was there, but some instinct made me call out for her. Then the boat jerked forward suddenly. The figure was gone. The dolls sank beneath the water. The little girl was gone. The ride continued, mechanically perfect, as if nothing had happened. I stumbled off the ride, drenched, my clothes soaked through, heart racing uncontrollably. Cast members came rushing, asking if I was okay. I told them I slipped, that it was fine, but I couldn't look at them, couldn't tell them what I'd seen. They didn't know. They wouldn't believe me. I left Disneyland that day, vowing never to return. But the nightmares began almost immediately. I dreamt of the dolls floating just beneath my bed, staring up at me, whispering the same words over and over. "Don't leave." I dreamt of the faceless figure, bending in impossible angles, stretching through the shadows of my apartment. I tried to tell myself it was stress, imagination, trauma from being alone for so long, but the wet feeling, the sensation of water brushing against my legs in my sleep, was real. Months later, I checked the news, hoping for an explanation, some story about maintenance mishaps or ride malfunctions. Nothing. No mention of accidents, no ride closures. Disneyland acted as if nothing had ever happened. I tried to tell friends. Some laughed, some looked concerned, some said it was probably just stress. But when I described the little girl, their faces went pale. Every one of them, before dismissing me, had the same reaction: uneasy, almost frightened. I realized they'd all read stories online, rumors about the ride, but no one ever admitted they believed them. I stopped talking about it after that. Even now, years later, I can't pass Disneyland on the freeway without my stomach dropping. The park looks normal, cheerful, bustling with life, but I know what lies beneath the surface. The dolls, the figure, the little girl, and the whisper that never leaves me, don't leave. I've tried to rationalize it. Maintenance gone wrong, my imagination, mass hallucination, stress, but nothing fits. The memory is too visceral, too tactile. The cold water, the weight of the dolls, the featureless face, reaching for me. I don't know what happened that day. I only know I escaped. I only know it wasn't human. And I know that somewhere beneath the bright lights, the music, the laughter, it still waits, watching, waiting for the next person to step into the water. I haven't gone back. I never will. Story the end. I went to Disneyland with a group of friends during a summer trip. We were all in our early 20s, out of college, and looking for a few days of fun and escape. We'd planned everything down to the hour: rides, meals, parades, but I should have known that real life doesn't follow a schedule, especially when the strange and unexplainable wants to make itself known. It started on the first day, just as we were walking into the park. The morning was bright and full of the usual excitement. Families crowded the gates, kids screaming in delight, strollers zigzagging, the smell of popcorn and churros hanging in the air. Nothing seemed off, at least not at first, but I noticed him almost immediately. A man who didn't belong. He was standing near the entrance, right by the ropes where the cast members usually check tickets. He wore the typical Disney costume, a vest with a name tag, crisp white shirt, and black pants. But something was wrong. His vest was old, faded in odd patches, and his name tag read Martin, but it had a small crack running diagonally across it. He wasn't smiling, not in the way cast members do. He was just staring at the crowd with an intensity that felt wrong. I nudged my friend Jake. "Hey, check out that guy. Doesn't he look weird?" Jake glanced over, shrugged, and went back to talking to someone else. Everyone else seemed oblivious. But I couldn't look away. His eyes followed us as we passed through the gates. When I looked back after buying tickets, he was gone. I told myself it was nothing, just a weird guy in a costume. The day went on normally, rides, photos, the works. But as evening approached, I began noticing little things. Shadows where they shouldn't be, figures disappearing when I turned my head. My friends laughed it off, saying I was tired from walking all day, but I knew something wasn't right. We decided to watch the fireworks from near Sleeping Beauty's castle. The crowd was dense, the air sticky with the scent of summer and food. When the fireworks began, I saw him again. Martin, standing in the shadows near a side street, partially hidden by a lamppost. His posture was stiff, unnatural, and the crack in his name tag seemed to glint in the fireworks' light. He didn't move, didn't react to the crowd, but he was watching me. Not my friends, just me. I tried to look away, convince myself I was imagining it, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. After the fireworks, we headed toward Main Street to grab snacks before leaving. I kept checking behind me, expecting him to be gone, but as we passed the store that sold plush toys, I saw him again, closer this time. I froze. He was no longer subtle, no longer a background figure. His eyes were wide, his mouth stretched into that same unnatural smile, and he took a step forward, slow, jerky, like a malfunctioning robot. I grabbed my friend Maria's arm. "We need to leave. Now." She looked at me, confused, and followed my gaze. There was nothing there. The spot was empty. "He's not here," she said. I shook my head. "He was. I swear." "We need to go." We hurried out of the store, blending into the crowd, but the feeling of being followed persisted. Every corner we turned, every alleyway, every store we passed, I thought I saw him. Flickers of movement in the periphery. Sometimes I saw the crack in his name tag glint. Sometimes I saw the smile. But when I turned fully, he wasn't there. By the time we got to the exit, I was exhausted and tense. My friends were joking and laughing, oblivious to the gnawing fear in my chest. But as we stepped onto the esplanade, I stopped dead. The world around me went silent. Not for everyone, just for me. The music, the chatter, the clatter of the trams, all gone. My vision narrowed, and I saw him, Martin, standing at the edge of the crowd, perfectly still, framed between two lampposts. This time, he looked worse than ever. Parts of him flickered like a broken projection. His eyes were milky white, blank, unseeing. The crack in his name tag glowed faintly, pulsating like it was alive. He lifted one hand, slowly, unnaturally, and whispered a voice that didn't come out of his mouth, but directly into my head. "Stay with us." I bolted. My legs carried me past the crowd. I passed my friends who were calling my name, past the tram stop. I didn't stop until we were back in our hotel room, locked in, breathing heavily. My friends laughed, thinking I was joking, but I wasn't. I couldn't get the image out of my mind, the flickering, smiling figure, the glowing crack in the name tag, the whisper in my head. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him in the corner of the room, just standing there, staring. When I tried to shake it off, I told myself it was exhaustion, that Disneyland is overwhelming, that I just imagined him. But deep down, I knew it wasn't a hallucination. The next day, we tried to go back to the park. I stayed close to my friends, not looking around too much. But as soon as we passed the gates, I saw something that made my stomach drop. A man in a cast member uniform was handing out maps near the entrance. Vest faded, shirt crisp, name tag cracked diagonally. It wasn't him exactly. It couldn't have been. But it was similar. The same wrongness in the posture, the eyes, the smile. I didn't breathe until we were back on the tram to the hotel. Months later, I found a Reddit post about a guy who claimed he saw a creepy Disneyland employee lurking near Main Street, always watching people, never talking, sometimes disappearing entirely. His description matched Martin perfectly. The cracked name tag, the stiff posture, the too wide smile. I never told anyone else the full story. People would think I was crazy or that I was exaggerating. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know that Disneyland isn't always just the happiest place on earth. Sometimes it's a place where the things that shouldn't exist linger in plain sight, waiting for someone to notice them. I haven't been back since that trip. I don't want to. And every time I see someone wearing a Disney vest, smiling a little too widely, I feel that same cold dread creeping up my spine, because some things don't just disappear when the park closes. Some things never leave. Story the end. I remember the day clearly, though I wish I didn't. It was a warm July afternoon, the sun beginning to dip behind the Anaheim skyline, casting Disneyland in that golden haze that makes everything feel almost unreal. My friends, Mark, Lisa, and I, had planned this trip for months. None of us had been in years, and we wanted one last summer adventure before college started. The park was crowded, as usual, but we were too excited to care. The sounds of laughter, music, and screams from the rides filled the air, creating that unmistakable Disneyland energy. We spent most of the day wandering between rides, snapping photos, and laughing at the obvious magic of it all. Mark was obsessed with getting every possible photo with characters. Lisa, more cautious, kept glancing around like she expected something bad to happen, though we teased her for it. I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary until later that evening, near dusk, when we decided to check out the less crowded parts of the park. That's when it started. We were walking through Adventureland, the smell of popcorn and churros blending with the tropical scent of the fake palm trees. I remember seeing a woman in an old-fashioned Disneyland uniform, a red vest, white gloves, and a small hat, standing perfectly still near the edge of the walkway. At first, I thought she was a performer for some promotional event, but when I waved, she didn't respond. Her eyes, something about them didn't feel right. She was staring, not at me exactly, but through me. Then she said, almost in a whisper, "Don't stay past closing." I laughed nervously. Lisa's face went pale. "What did she just say?" she asked. I shrugged it off, assuming it was some weird joke. But the tone in her voice lingered with me. We went on a few more rides, including Indiana Jones and the Jungle Cruise, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. By the time the fireworks started, the park had thinned out considerably. Families were leaving, employees were ushering the last guests out of the stores, and the music playing over the loudspeakers sounded eerily distorted, as if someone had slowed it down slightly. That's when I lost sight of Lisa. At first, I thought she'd gone to get a drink or buy something. But 20 minutes passed and she still hadn't returned. I started texting her, calling, even wandering back through the nearby attractions. Nothing. I began to panic when I noticed a small cast member only gate slightly ajar near the Jungle Cruise exit. I don't know why, but I felt drawn toward it, like some part of me knew Lisa had gone in there. I slipped through the gate. The corridor behind it was narrow and dimly lit, with a faint smell of mildew mixed with something metallic, something I couldn't place. The laughter and music of the park disappeared instantly. I called Lisa's name, but my voice sounded muffled like the walls were swallowing it. I walked slowly, my eyes adjusting to the low light, and that's when I noticed old props stacked along the walls, animatronic animals, broken ride vehicles, and a pile of faded costumes. Then I heard it. A soft sobbing, almost imperceptible, coming from further down the hall. My stomach tightened. I called her name again, and the sobbing stopped immediately. A figure stepped out from behind a stack of crates. A woman, the same uniform I had seen earlier. Her face was pale, eyes dark and hollow, her gloves stained with a dark substance. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Not a warning, not a suggestion, more like a statement of fact. "I'm looking for my friend," I said, my voice shaking. "Have you seen her?" She tilted her head slowly, unnaturally. "She's with the others." "The others?" My heart started pounding in my chest. "They don't smile," she said softly, almost mournfully. She should have smiled. Before I could react, she started moving toward me. Her movements were stiff, almost mechanical, and a deep sense of dread settled over me. I turned and ran, my shoes pounding on the concrete floor, echoing off the walls. Somewhere behind me I heard footsteps, more than one set, gaining on me. I ran blindly, taking turns at random, desperately hoping to find a door that led back to the main park. The corridors twisted and turned, a maze of service hallways and storage areas I had no idea existed. Occasionally I'd catch glimpses of more figures in red vests, standing motionless in the shadows, watching. Their eyes never moved, but I could feel them following me. Finally, I burst through a set of doors into a large workshop area filled with ride vehicles and dismantled animatronics. And that's when I saw it, a wall covered with photographs. Hundreds of them, pinned haphazardly, all of people at Disneyland. Families, couples, children, employees. Some of the photos were years old, yellowed with age. Others were freshly printed, the ink still dark. And among them was Lisa. She was in the center, her eyes wide, mouth slightly open, like she hadn't realized someone was taking the picture. My stomach dropped. I recognized the moment. It was the exact time she had disappeared. I backed away, my hands shaking, and that's when I heard another voice. Calm. Cold. "She's below." I didn't wait to ask what he meant. I ran, twisting through more hallways, ducking behind crates, trying doors that led nowhere, until I finally found an emergency exit that opened onto the path behind Pirates of the Caribbean. The outdoor air hit me like a wave. I ran, not looking back, until I was in New Orleans Square, blending into the remaining guests. The sounds of the park returned, but the unease didn't leave me. Every laugh, every music note felt like it was hiding something. I found a security officer and explained what had happened, breathless, nearly incoherent. He nodded, taking my report calmly, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of something I couldn't identify. When I asked about Lisa, he said she had been found, waiting near the parking lot. Relief crashed over me, but it was mixed with a gnawing suspicion I couldn't shake. When I got to the parking lot, Lisa was sitting in the car, staring blankly ahead. She didn't remember anything between Adventureland and the lot. She didn't remember walking through the park, didn't remember anyone else being with her. She only remembered the feeling of being watched and the insistence that she smile. We drove away quickly, not speaking much. The lights of Disneyland faded behind us, but the sense of wrongness lingered. In the days that followed, we avoided talking about it too much. The photos I had taken that day, most of them innocent snapshots, all had one strange anomaly. Every single photo had faint shadows in the corners, too dark to make out clearly, shapes that resembled those red-vested figures, always just beyond the edges, always watching. Months later, Lisa began having nightmares, recurring dreams of white gloves reaching from dark corners, of hallways that stretched impossibly, of voices whispering to her about smiling and following rules. She would wake screaming, drenched in sweat. And when I looked at the photos again, One in particular made my stomach turn. A small service gate, slightly ajar, and in the darkness behind it, a pair of gloved hands, faintly lit by the dim corridor light, as if beckoning me to come back. To this day, we never returned. We never talk about that night except in whispers. Disneyland is supposed to be the happiest place on earth, a place of magic and memories. But some part of it, some part hidden behind the rides and smiles, is something else entirely. Something alive, something patient. And sometimes late at night, I still see her face in my dreams, eyes wide and unblinking, whispering the same thing the red-vested woman did: "Don't stay past closing." It was a Tuesday evening in early October when I finally decided to visit Disneyland alone. I had grown up in Anaheim, just a few miles away, but life had gotten complicated, and my visits to the park had dwindled after high school. Now in my late 20s, I was on my own, curious to see if the magic of my childhood still lingered in the air. The park was unusually quiet for a weekday evening. The sun was dipping behind the Matterhorn, painting the sky in burnt orange, and there were fewer families than usual. I shrugged it off, thinking the season and the approaching Halloween weekend kept crowds down. I started with Fantasyland, riding small attractions I remembered as a kid. It was nostalgic, even comforting, until I noticed something odd. A small group of children near the carousel weren't moving like normal kids. They were standing in a line, facing the ride, but perfectly still, their heads tilted slightly, their eyes fixed forward. I laughed nervously, assuming they were just intensely watching the ride, but then I noticed the parents, or what should have been parents, weren't moving either. They were behind the children, but they too seemed stiff, almost doll-like. I shook my head and told myself it was a trick of the light, maybe the way shadows fell from the carousel. I tried to focus on the ride, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I decided to move on, heading toward Tomorrowland, hoping a change of scenery would help. The streets were emptier than I expected. Normally, even on slow weekdays, there's a buzz of people talking, laughing, or the clatter of strollers. Tonight, there was nothing but the low hum of the overhead speakers playing faint Disney music, slightly distorted, almost like it was underwater. As I passed the rocket jets, I noticed a cast member standing alone near the ride entrance. He was young, wearing the classic Tomorrowland uniform, but he wasn't moving, not even blinking. His posture was perfect, too perfect, almost robotic. When I walked past him, he didn't react, didn't even seem to notice me. I shrugged again, telling myself he was on break or frozen in some weird cast member moment, and continued walking. Then I heard it, a faint whisper behind me. I froze. The park was empty, except for me. The whispering continued, soft and almost indecipherable. It sounded like children talking, laughing, but distorted, warped. I turned quickly, scanning the area, but there was nothing. I told myself I was imagining things and started walking faster toward the main hub of the park. That's when I noticed the shadows. They weren't normal shadows cast by the park lights. They moved independently, stretching, shrinking, and sometimes darting in directions that made no sense. One shadow even seemed to follow me, skittering along the pavement even when no figure was present. My heart rate spiked, and I began to jog toward the castle, hoping to find other guests, other signs of life. The closer I got, the stranger it became. The castle lights were dimmer than usual, flickering in an uneven rhythm. A thin fog was rolling in from the pathways, unusual for a dry October evening. I reached the castle hub and noticed a figure standing in front of the moat. At first glance, it looked like a family taking photos, but then I realized there were no faces. Just smooth, featureless surfaces where eyes, noses, and mouths should have been. The figures didn't move, didn't react to anything around them. My stomach dropped. I turned away, heart pounding, and noticed another cast member approaching. This one looked older, a little disheveled, with a worried expression. "Are you okay?" he asked. Relief flooded through me. I think so," I stammered. "It's just, the park feels weird tonight." He looked around nervously. "You shouldn't be here after closing," he said. "It's safer if you leave through the staff exit." "Staff exit?" I echoed. "Where's that?" He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder like he was afraid someone or something was watching. "Follow me, but don't look back, and whatever you do, don't stop moving." I followed him, my adrenaline spiking with every step. We ducked through a small alley near the castle and into a narrow hallway marked staff access only. The lights flickered, buzzing overhead, and the hum of machinery filled the air. "You're lucky I found you," the cast member whispered. "Some guests, they get lost. Some never leave." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shaking. He didn't answer. He just led me down a winding corridor that opened into the utilitador system, the network of underground tunnels Disneyland uses for staff and logistics. It was dimly lit, labyrinthine, and smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and machinery oil. I felt like I had stepped into another world, one beneath the one I knew. We walked in silence for several minutes until we reached a small room lined with monitors. On one screen, the park was visible from above. Most areas were empty, but some showed the ghostly figures I had seen earlier. The still children, the faceless adults, the stiff cast members. They were multiplying, converging on areas that were supposedly closed. "They're not real," the cast member said quietly, almost to himself. "Not guests, not projections, something else. Some part of the park that doesn't belong to anyone." I stared at the screen, horrified. One of the faceless adults turned slowly toward the camera as if sensing me through the monitor. My stomach turned. What are they?" I asked. He shook his head. "We don't know. Some of us think it's residual energy, left over from the thousands of visitors over the years. Others think it's something older, something that's always been here." A sudden loud clang echoed through the tunnel system. We both froze. The cast member motioned for me to stay silent. Footsteps, or something like footsteps, echoed through the corridor. Slow, deliberate. Getting closer. "They can follow you," he whispered, "but only if they think you're alone. Stick with me." We moved faster, turning corners, ducking into side corridors. The footsteps echoed behind us, always just out of sight. Shadows flickered along the walls, impossible shapes, twisting and moving independently of anything solid. Finally, we reached a heavy metal door labeled Emergency Exit. The cast member swiped a card, and the door creaked open into a dimly lit alley behind the park. The night air hit me like a wall. I could hear distant traffic, distant voices, real, living people. Relief washed over me. "You're safe now," he said. "Go. Don't stop moving, and whatever you do, don't come back here after dark." I didn't argue. I ran to my car parked a few blocks away and didn't look back until I was on the freeway. In the rearview mirror, I could have sworn I saw a shadow at the edge of the parking lot. Tall, featureless, still. I've never returned to Disneyland after sunset. I still live in Anaheim, and sometimes I drive past the park, watching the lights in the distance. But every now and then, especially on quiet nights, I can't shake the memory of those faceless figures, the stiff cast members and the whispering children. Something about that night stayed with me. The way the park's magic twisted into something unrecognizable when the crowds disappeared. Some people might dismiss it as a trick of the mind, exhaustion or imagination running wild. But I know what I saw. I felt it. And if you ever visit Disneyland alone after dark, be careful. Not everything in the park belongs to the living. Some parts of it have never left. Story the end. It was mid-July when my friends and I decided to take a trip to Disneyland. I was 23, freshly out of college, and feeling invincible in that naive way you do when your parents aren't hovering and your friends still think you're funny. My friends, Sarah, Kevin, and Mike, were just as hyped. Sarah had been planning this trip for months, obsessively tracking FastPass availability and crowd calendars. Kevin and Mike were just along for the ride, though Kevin kept insisting he was too cool for Disney. I didn't care. I just wanted a fun day away from the city, with rides, churros, and laughter. We got to Disneyland around 8 in the morning, right as the gates were opening. The park was already alive with the hum of families, the squeals of children, and the distant strains of Disney music. For the first few hours, everything was perfect. We went on Space Mountain, Pirates of the Caribbean, and even managed to sneak onto the Haunted Mansion without waiting more than 10 minutes. Sarah took endless pictures, posting them to Instagram as if to prove she was having the ultimate summer day. Kevin and Mike kept complaining about heat and lines, but I ignored them, too caught up in the nostalgic giddiness. By late afternoon, the sun was high and the park was packed. We decided to take a break near the Matterhorn. That's when we first noticed it, or rather, him. At first, I thought it was just another cast member. He was wearing one of those dark green Disneyland uniforms, But it didn't look right. The shirt was faded, the name tag crooked, and his shoes were scuffed in a way that seemed unnatural for someone who worked in a theme park. He was standing at the edge of the crowd, just watching. His gaze followed us, not with curiosity or friendliness, but with a kind of cold, calculated focus that made the back of my neck prickle. "Hey, is that guy a new cast member?" Sarah asked, noticing him too. "I don't think so," I said. "He doesn't look like he belongs here." Kevin shrugged. "It's Disneyland. People dress weird all the time." But we couldn't shake the feeling that he was waiting for something. As the day wore on, we started noticing him more. He appeared in the distance on Main Street, near Tomorrowland, even at the edge of Fantasyland as we left the teacups. Every time we looked away, he would vanish, only to appear somewhere else. Not walking, not moving naturally, almost as if he was gliding. By evening, Sarah suggested we check out the backlot areas. She'd read online that there were some hidden corners of the park most guests never saw, especially around Toontown and the utility paths behind Fantasyland. Kevin groaned, but Sarah was insistent. "It'll be an adventure," she said, dragging us along. We ducked through a small gate near the castle into a narrow service pathway that smelled faintly of engine oil and bleach. The crowds were gone. The distant sounds of the park felt muffled. It was eerie, like we had stepped into a place Disneyland didn't want us to see. "That's weird," Mike said, stopping. "This isn't on any map." We followed the path anyway, curiosity overpowering common sense. The pavement was cracked, weeds pushing through in places. There were signs of construction. Old carts left abandoned, trash bins overflowing despite the park's usual immaculate standards. And then we saw him again. The man from before was standing at the end of the path, this time closer. His face was partially obscured by shadow, but I could see that his eyes, dark, unnerving eyes, were fixed on us. He didn't move when we froze. He didn't say anything. He just waited. "Maybe we should turn back," I whispered. Sarah shook her head. "No way. We've come this far." Kevin muttered, "This is getting creepy." As we continued, we came across a gate with a small, faded sign, "Authorized personnel only." Sarah, never one to be deterred, pushed it open. The path beyond was darker, narrower, and even more deserted. I started feeling a tight knot in my stomach. My instincts screamed that we were making a mistake. But we had come this far, and Sarah's excitement was contagious. We stepped into what looked like an abandoned courtyard. There were old animatronic figures, some dismantled, parts scattered on the ground. Dust and cobwebs coated everything. The air was still, heavy. The distant laughter and music of Disneyland felt impossibly far away. Then we heard it. A metallic scraping noise, faint but deliberate, echoing from the far end of the courtyard. "What was that?" Mike whispered, his voice shaking. "I don't know," Sarah said, shining her phone flashlight toward the sound. The figure from before appeared at the far end of the courtyard. This time there was no mistaking it. He wasn't a regular cast member. His movements were jerky, unnatural, almost robotic. His face, it was wrong. Too pale, too smooth, like a mannequin. His eyes didn't blink. We froze. He tilted his head slowly, unnaturally, as if assessing us. And then he started moving toward us. "Run!" I shouted. We bolted, tripping over debris, hearts pounding. The sound of metal scraping against concrete followed us, echoing like a predator's footsteps. Sarah yelled something, but I couldn't hear over the adrenaline rushing in my ears. We found a small service ladder leading up to a maintenance platform and scrambled up, pulling ourselves over the edge. From there, we could see the man below. He didn't climb after us. Instead, he paused, looking up, then slowly turned and walked back into the shadows. We stayed on that platform for what felt like an eternity, waiting for him to reappear. When we finally climbed down and managed to reach a public path, we didn't stop running until we were safely back in Tomorrowland, surrounded by the normal chaos of the park. We tried to explain what had happened to a cast member, but they brushed us off politely, insisting there was nothing dangerous back there. Security was even less helpful. Their smiles were too tight, their eyes too blank. It was as if they had expected us to come back with this story. We left the park that night shaken and silent. None of us slept well. Over the next few days, I started noticing strange things in the photos Sarah had taken. In the background of a shot from the Matterhorn, I could see a tall figure standing, watching us, face obscured by shadow. In another photo near Pirates of the Caribbean, there was the same figure, closer, almost as if he had followed us the entire day. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a park employee who was supposed to be there. Maybe it was just a trick of shadows and light. But deep down, I knew what I saw was real. Weeks later, I read a blog post from a former Disneyland employee. They wrote about backstage anomalies, describing a section of the park that was technically off limits to guests, where experimental animatronics were tested. According to the post, some of the older models had malfunctioned, exhibiting unpredictable behaviors. I don't know what we encountered that day, but I do know one thing. Disneyland has a side that no one talks about. A side where the magic stops and something else waits. Something that can watch you, follow you, and disappear before anyone else sees. I haven't been back. I don't plan to. And sometimes when I see videos of Disneyland on YouTube, I swear I can spot him in the background. A tall, blank-faced figure lurking just at the edge of the crowd, watching, waiting. I told my friends about the blog post, hoping it would make us feel better. But Kevin said something I can't forget. What if some of them never stopped watching? I still have nightmares. Not of ghosts or clowns or anything traditionally scary, but of that figure, of his blank face, the unnatural tilt of his head, the way he moved, and the certainty that he knew exactly where we were, exactly what we were doing. Disneyland is supposed to be the happiest place on Earth, but there are corners even the happiest place hides. Corners where the illusions fade, where something watches, and where the magic turns into something else entirely. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still hear that metallic scraping echoing through the abandoned courtyard, and I know somewhere he's still there, waiting for someone else to wander into the shadows. Story the end.